You want to hit record. Is it you or is it Inga?
Recording in progress.
Perfect. All right, welcome to the Village of Cottage Grove Village Board of Trustees meeting on Monday, June 15th, 2026. This is a hybrid meeting taking place both virtually on Zoom with the link at the top of the agenda and in person at Village Hall. You can also watch it now or later on our YouTube channel. It's 6:30, so I'll call the meeting to order. We have a quorum and the agenda was properly posted, so we'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, so we're on number 4, the public appearances, public's opportunity to speak. We'll start with individuals in the room and then move to individuals on Zoom. We ask that you state your name, your address, and hold your comments to no more than 3 minutes. We do not have any wish to speak forms that were submitted prior, so we'll ask if anyone in the room would like to give public comments. Seeing none, we'll move to Zoom. If there's anyone who'd like to give public comments, you can put your mouse over the react button and use the raise hand feature. All right, seeing no one on Zoom, we're going to move on to number 5, discuss and consider the minutes of the village board meeting on June 1st, 2026.
Cindy, I have one change on page 2, item 8B under Deer Grove EMS. The wording should be service animal, not animal service. Just to swap that, because that might have a totally different meaning.
Yes.
Otherwise, I would move approval with that change.
Okay.
And I'll second.
All right, motion by Severson, second by Murphy with a minor change. Any other discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. Number 6, presentations to the board. We're going to hear from Village Administrator and Assistant Administrator Finance Director. So Matt and Cam, I'll turn it over to you for a tax incremental financing 101.
Yes, thank you. We put together an overview here of TIF districts, and we're going to cover what they are, how they're created, how they work, and then cover the villages, 5 soon to be 4 TIF districts in there as well. So Cameron's going to kick us off, and I'll fill in here and there.
Yeah, and when we were putting this together, I just want to mention, please ask questions. We could have made this 100 slides. We chose to keep it, I think, less than 10. So please, make this as interactive as you'd like. So just kind of want to the first part where I think a lot of confusion comes from, and just that's the terminology between TIF and TID and TIDs. A lot of different terminology is used when we're talking about these districts. So just a reminder that the TIF stands for tax incremental financing. That's the tool, the mechanism that's used to when we're talking about the revenues and expenditures related to the project costs within the district. And then the TID is the actual boundary of the district, or all the parcels that make up that district. And so what tax incremental financing districts do is they allow the municipality to capture incremental property tax revenue from growth in a defined area and use it to that benefit of that area. So different types of districts, when we're looking and we're analyzing where districts can be created, you can start with a comprehensive plan and identify what types of development are going to happen within that district. So the state has allowed kind of two kind of buckets as terms as that max life. The 20 years for the mixed use and industrial, and the 27 years for the blighted area conservation and environment. For the longer term, just the broad reason for that is it just takes longer to recover typically when there's environmental remediation that needs to be completed. So think, there's an area where there used to be like a gas spill or something, and it's maybe the center of town, and we want to redevelop that area, and we as a municipality kind of take on the obligation to clean up any of those environmental risks to kind of get the site ready to be able to be redeveloped. Those are kind of the reason for that district. More common type of district is that mixed use. And that kind of gives us the most flexibility with the combination of industrial, commercial, and residential. And note, just as we're talking about the slides today, this is specific to kind of what we're referred to the traditional TIDs. The residential TIDs kind of follow a completely different set of rules. So with the mixed use, there can be up to 35% of newly platted residential.
All right. As I mentioned, technically we have 5 total TIDs right now, although TID 5 is going to be closing. So technically 4 active TIDs, and even within that, there's really a technicality because it's really 3 active because TID number 6, which it was essentially overlaid by TID number 9, essentially replaced most of that area. So TID number 6 is really just at the corner of Main Street and Cottage Grove Road, and that being the bank. And the remainder of TID 9 is primarily Authentics, and then the redevelopment area that is to the west of Village Hall that the Village Board has been working on. So that also extends a little bit west on the Cottage Grove Road corridor to cover the multi-tenant retail spaces and items like that. TID number 8 is the West Cottage Grove Road corridor. That includes current projects being the dental office and Foundations Dance and the new tech building. So those are examples of development in that district. And then TID 10 north of the interstate is, as you all know, that's where Amazon is. And that's about a 300-acre TIF district, and half of that acreage is Amazon. And then finally, TID 5, which is closing here this summer, that is primarily the Commerce Park area. That is south of the interstate.
Yeah, so kind of a common question that I get, comes along the TID creation process. So one of the first tests that has to pass before being able to create a TID district is increment value of existing TIDs plus proposed base value of new TID districts must be less than 12% of the equalized value. As kind of noted on the slide, our current percentage of increment in 2025 was 23.31% of our equalized value. And so there was some proactive planning when Summit kind of came online. Because we are a smaller community, one development can really push that percentage higher. So we created TID 8, 9, and 10 in areas that were identified as developable areas or areas that might need some assistance from a public infrastructure perspective. So, and really the thought process on the DOR is just making sure that not an excessive amount of your overall equalized value is located within your TID district.
Since TIDs 6 and 9 overlap, is that double counted or is that single counted?
Good question. So it is fundamentally, when we get into the next slide, it is any increment that's created does not get assigned while it's located within the TID 6 boundaries. Value can only be counted twice. So when we overlap that area, any improvements in that area are assigned to TID 9. So it is not double counted. There could be a unique situation where like a building was midway done, you froze the district, and it had part of the improvements in one district and part of it in the other. But no, it cannot be double counted. As kind of highlighted before, the new residential TID is outside of this. So any TID districts created under that purview would be there would be an additional 3% of residential TIDs. So kind of, and just from a copyright perspective, I think this is a good illustration that I've gotten from a prior Ellers presentation. But really, what the intent of this graph is to kind of show when we freeze essentially an area, it creates what's known as the base property value. And why that's important is when the district is created, all the taxing jurisdictions continue to collect the same amount of value and mill rate for the base property as they did the day that they created. The difference, though, happens as additional increment or project value comes on. The municipality, or us as the village, keep all taxing jurisdiction portion of any additional increment created. And so what that allows the village to do is with areas that are more difficult to develop, that require additional, stormwater or water or sewer or road infrastructure improvements that maybe make it too costly for one development to do, but if we create a district and kind of share those costs within an area, similar to TID 5, it allows us to kind of, instead of only getting about 30% of that revenue, we get 100% of the revenue. So when the TID district closes, then everybody benefits from a raised assessment, which then ends up decreasing, or may, obviously, in our situation, we've had some very successful TIDs.
And we put together a project plan that outlines this, and we present that to the other taxing jurisdictions, so the county, the school district, and the tech school. So they review that, and basically, as a group, they come to a determination that without doing this TIF district, by doing this TIF district, the development will it'll either happen much sooner, or without it, it wouldn't happen maybe at all, or it'll happen much sooner with the TIF district. So, and that project plan essentially then is what we use to kind of build the capital asks that the board ends up seeing, or that we work with developers on.
Yeah, and I'll kind of touch on that in a little bit after this next slide. So kind of what revenue is collected by the TID district is generated in the same value, so kind of a similar graphic as before. Instead of only collecting that local value of, in this case, $650, the village of the increment value is able to collect that total. So that multiplication factor is pretty significant in being able to provide the assistance some areas need to develop. And so this graph is really telling. Cottage Grove is extremely lucky. Cottage Grove's TIDs are very well managed in comparison to other communities that I've either been a part of or I've helped. The blue lines, which are slivers on this graph, represent the base values of each district. So most communities out there would be doing backflips for seeing the increment value that was generated in TID 9. So you start with your 9.8, you're up to 55 million. Most districts aim for some type of base to increment value at that range. With TID 7 that closed 2 years ago now, obviously TID 5 and eventually what will be TID 10, that incremental value above base really highlights that these were areas that did not have a lot of value when they came into the district, but are returning or will return to the district or the community with significantly higher value. And so obviously, to put it in comparison, if we were talking about the 12% rule, TID 5 alone would be enough to be above the 12% creation rule. As you kind of see the list here of eligible project costs, I do want to caveat this. Most of the time, project plans are written in a way to make sure we cover any situation that might happen whether that be certain public improvements that might need to happen, intersection improvements, site improvements that need to be. It's very important that when we're doing this, we're also evaluating, is there an ability to repay the project? And that's the most common misconception or misunderstanding when communities are evaluating projects to be TID eligible. There has to be a funding source. Otherwise, you get in a situation where you either have debt service or project costs that are leaning most of the time heavily on the general fund. And so what that means is until a project happens, you're basically cash flowing it with reserves or other resources in the general fund. Now, that's not uncommon for the first 1 to 3 years of the district because you have some administrative costs to kind of get it up and running. But as we've kind of seen in TID 6, there were TID eligible costs that were put in the district, but there was just not development to support it. So all of those projects had to get done regardless of if they were put in the TID district or not. But it just so happened that the development didn't happen at the pace that it needed to in order to recoup those full costs.
We always speak to it as there's TID eligible and then there's TID feasible. So eligible means it's eligible, it's in our TID project plan. The taxing jurisdictions have given authorization and the board could approve those projects and we could legally do them, but they're not feasible from they may not be feasible from the standpoint of being able to realistically cash flow as in the pro forma of the district. So we always want to make sure it's both eligible and feasible.
And so typically, we kind of start with the development, the increment from a development should be able to support any improvements that needed to be done for that development. Where we get in a situation kind of like in TID 9, where we have a development that didn't require any type of incentive or minimum incentive, that's when we start looking at, okay, is there anything within a half a mile of the district from an infrastructure perspective that we could pay for using it, and is it going to cash flow? So an example of that would be a through road here on the other side of Authentics for a connection if needed, or possible future intersection. And those are the things that we evaluate. If we've kind of surpassed the more likely than not that we're going to recover our initial investments. One that's a little bit more common is the prorated share of utility infrastructure. So that's one where if a certain development, and this happened in TID 5 with well number 4, calculating, okay, because we had to create well 4, how much should that TID district, or can that TID district pay based off of how much pumping capacity is required to service the businesses over there? So that becomes a powerful tool as both water and sewer infrastructure are barriers to overall development. Prohibited, and these are explicitly stated prohibited costs. The DOR does not like getting in the middle of determining what's eligible or non-eligible. They just list a couple of prohibited items. So constructing or expanding municipal facilities, facilities financed with user fees, general government expenses, and then costs associated with newly platted, with obviously the qualifying rule here. So the expenditure period just defines the maximum period of time where a TID can incur expenses or obligate revenue related to the project plan. It ends 5 years prior to the maximum life. Really the concept there is we want to make sure that municipalities aren't plugging additional expenses to TID districts, and then you get to the end of the life and then there's not enough time to capture revenue. So that 5-year window of occurring new obligation was intended to make sure that there's some additional time to recover cost. After expenditure ends, TID may continue to pay debt service, contractually obligated expensive, and ongoing administrative expenses. If a TID district is extended, so like TID 6 was extended 6 years to help recover some of that debt service, that does not change the date to incur new obligation. It just prolongs the period of time where we can recover the costs that have already been incurred.
Can I just ask a quick question on that?
Yeah.
So on that last slide, so for instance with TID 5, because of that 5-year, I mean, we're getting ready to close it, so it's too late, obviously, to try to utilize any funds to rebuild the intersection or make road improvements in there. It's too late.
Yes, that was, I think that was roughly 2019, 2020,
Okay.
one of the, yeah.
Okay.
And that's something where we'll talk about too. So TID 10 is likely going to be a situation that's going to far and exceed the revenue required. We are going to be very proactively looking at what improvements may need to be done in that area. That is eligible to be done prior to the end of that period. TID 5 was in a little bit of struggling state for an extended period of time. There was some concern about the viability of that area, but it turned around. So it was kind of that period of time where at that time when we were getting close to the expenditure period, there's a ton of projects that moved forward. And then obviously we passed that period to incur additional expenses.
And the difference with TID 5 is, and I don't think you'll see many communities at least in Dane County, going with the model where the municipality is the developer. So maybe you can go to the next slide, Cameron. TID number 5, the village was the developer, essentially bought all the land, built all the roads, utilities, infrastructure, and that can work, but you're taking out all that debt and then hoping that the development comes. In this case, it turned out to be a great bet for the community, but not one in the current environment. We look to do more as the reimbursable TID. So we work with a developer to guarantee a certain level of value assessment added, and then we may reimburse them for the eligible project costs. So that's how the latter is what's going on north of the interstate with Amazon and with many of our other developments. But TID 5 was when the village took out the debt service. It was about a $50 million total investment that the village put forth. The cool thing was the district started off as about a $3 million value and finished at $258 million. And 50 of that 258 is or 50 million is what the village invested, and we ended up with 258 million additional value. So that creates a win for residents in two different ways. One way is the surplus that you see up there. So at the end, all obligations have been met, and there's a $3.4 million surplus that gets distributed proportionally to all of our taxing jurisdictions, including ourselves. So we get a third of that, roughly $1 million. And the school district, as an example, would be closer to $2 million, 1.7-ish. So there's that cash infusion that could be used however each taxing jurisdiction would like to use that money. But on top of that, it's the added tax base. So adding that 258 million back into the tax rolls, that's where you've been hearing Cameron and I talking about the average resident seeing somewhere north of likely $1,000 for the average home, somewhere in there, in a reduced tax bill for the average home. So that's a big win. An example of one that Cameron had mentioned previously, where it was eligible but maybe not feasible, was TID number 6. And decades ago, the village board identified some intersection improvements to B, B, and N, and earmarked those costs to be paid for by the TIF district. At the end of the day, the village isn't out any money because that was a project that otherwise needed to happen. They were just hopeful that development would pay for it. That's not how we structure things today, but anyway, that's why that district wasn't ultimately successful. But now you have Authentics in that same area generating about $900,000 per year in tax revenue, and then being reinvested into the TID number 9 redevelopment area. As a whole, TIDs 8, 9, and 10 are all meeting or exceeding expectations, and Amazon specifically had a guaranteed value of, or has a guaranteed value of $245 million in assessment. And as of January 1 of this year, preliminarily, they're close to $400 million. So what that means in general dollar terms is somewhere close to about a $7 million tax bill from Amazon. That's about our entire tax levy. Right now, all of that goes back to the village, but to be used for eligible project costs north of the interstate. Once the district closes, and as things are progressing out there, it's likely to close, we're hoping certainly sooner than that anticipated closure, maybe a few years earlier than that. And then the village would be receiving approximately somewhere about $3 million tax bill from Amazon in perpetuity. Somewhere around there in perpetuity. And to put that in perspective, it'll be a little bit under that. I'm sorry. The police budget is approximately $3 million a year, and Amazon's bill will be slightly under that. But just to give some perspective, that a development of that size that can pay for, our most notable village department service. I think that covers what we have, but happy to take some additional questions.
Can I just follow up on this last slide super quick? So in the TIDs 8, 9, 10, so you mentioned eligible expenses within a half mile of the TID. So for instance, in the Amazon TID, could we build a fire station nearby and have that be an eligible expense for that area?
Unfortunately,
That's a prohibited expense.
Yeah, construction or
Oh, I
expanding
missed
municipal
that.
facilities. I have a feeling this was a fear of the legislation when they were creating this, and they wanted a caveat
Okay.
that.
All right, thank you.
Now, kind of indirectly, where I see where TID 10 could, there's likely infrastructure that instead of being levied for, can be paid with TID 10. So you're indirectly, possibly, you're getting the same benefit of having project costs picked up by the district to free up room elsewhere for certain facilities.
And there could be a notable cash surplus at the end of the district too. I mean, we were talking about how great TID 5 is, and it is at $258 million, but just Amazon alone is well north of that. And that's not even a final value. It'll be higher than that number in 2027. So there's an additional 150 acres to develop out there. Wouldn't be shocked to see that district close north of 500 million.
Go ahead, Renee.
So I hope I understood this correctly. So TID 6 is not going to close for a while, and it has a shortfall. So am I hearing this correctly, that other TIDs then, if there's a shortfall, will be able to, no. Okay, so that would be placed on taxpayers if that was not met.
So it will be balanced by the end of its life. It's just that there have been some shortfall payments that that residents have already been paying through the tax levy, through our debt service.
Yep. So currently in TID 6, there's roughly about $120,000 debt service payment related to the roadway, the water improvements, and the other improvements that need to be done. And there's generating roughly about $60,000 of increment per year. So every 2 years, I've been bringing forward kind of a formal forgiveness of the portion that wasn't able to be collected. So there'll be one more this year for roughly $120,000. And then in the last joint review board, it was projected that the last 4 years is only going to be $77,000 because there's going to be a couple years when we're done paying debt service, but we're still collecting some additional increment. This type of district, when it was created, there are TID districts out there where they can become a donor and a donee district situation where a positive performing district can pay obligations from a maybe not positive performing district. This is not unfortunately eligible for that.
Okay. So is there then different criteria for closing different TIDs early then? Or how do you determine that?
That was a good question. So with TID 6 specifically, Greg, Matt, and I sat down and we really evaluated what's the benefit of extending it that 6 years as opposed to just closing it, saying we're done, and levying for it all. So in the end of the day, it ended up coming where the $60,000 that we were able to get roughly a year, and then the 3 years that we didn't have the debt service payment outweighed the benefit of closing the district early. So you get a situation like TID 10, like let's say all the area of the district has development on it. And so state law requires us that as soon as we've done recovering eligible project costs, that we dissolve the district or we start those procedures. Now, what I caution that to some extent because there's sometimes opportunities where first I think we need to take an inventory of infrastructure in the area and see is there any additional costs that we can put within that district before closing it, because once we close it, then it's done. But the goal of the district is to dissolve it as soon as possible. And so where that would come up in, there's 3 audit requirements for districts. You do an audit at 30% of estimated expenditures. When you've met that 100% expenditures and then a closeout audit, it would come out in your closeout audit that you didn't close the district in the amount of time that was required. If they were showing several years of increment collected but no obligations.
We should say too, there's also an opportunity for the board to extend the life of the district for a year. I believe it's a year to, it's 2 years now. Okay, up to 2 years now, you can extend the life of a TIF district and create a housing fund. So all of the revenue generated during those years would go into a housing fund, and you'd have specific projects and utilization of that fund for affordable housing and housing related purposes. So it's kind of a cost benefit policy decision for the board to consider, where it's like, you know, do you want are the tax benefits so great that you want those now versus some identified housing need from an affordability standpoint? And I think with a slight delay of, do you have to extend it, Rick, the full 2, or can you go a year?
So that was just a recent law change. I think you can do 1 up to 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so where you see that, so we did that with TID 7. So we closed the district early, and then we extended it a year for the affordable housing. And that gave us at the time roughly, let's just call it $800,000. That's almost $900,000 now. The cool part of that bucket is 25% of those funds can be used to improve the housing stock. So think about your big ticket items when we have to put additional infrastructure in. There's essentially no rules unless it's going to improving the housing stock. The affordable housing component's actually really challenging to spend because there's such stringent requirements on it, but that 25% is a lot easier. But TID 5, for example, would it have been nice to have $5.5 million in that affordable housing fund? Yes. It just became, residents just needed relief. And so getting it closed, it's a really hard call to make in those instances.
And that's exactly why the feedback we hear from residents that when there's all this development and why do our taxes not go down? And it's really because of the tool of tax increment district, which is great, but it just takes, it's a long game in most cases. Even something as large as Amazon, where we'll likely be able to close that district years sooner, it's still, years sooner might be 3 or 4 years short of 20. So it's still playing the long game. So anyway.
I have two more questions if you can help me understand too. So for each TID, how do you parse through each TID, like the fees for engineering fees, consultants, administrative fees? How do you manage that?
Allers does a good job kind of helping us on setting broad parameters. So we're very lucky in Dane County, and unlike other rural areas, we very rarely have to pay any engineer and legal fees related to new development. Most of that time it's reimbursed. So we don't end up charging almost any time to the TID districts related to legal and engineering unless it's directly involved. There's a yearly DOR fee, which is $150, which again, not crazy. What I do typically is, so anybody who's working on TID related projects or needed in calculation, so like Matt, Aaron, and myself have portions of salaries and benefits allocated to those districts, because if we're spending time on that and not other things, it's the responsibility of those districts to pay for that time. So we kind of do an annual analysis on, so TID 9, for example, very active TID this year. An argument could be made that, there may need to be an adjustment of those percentages.
Okay, thank you. And then my last question is, you had mentioned with the Amazon and the roughly 3.4 million in perpetuity. So how is that 3.4 million specifically to MMSD, or does that go to Sun Prairie, or how is that?
So their total tax bill will continue to be 7 million plus. Of that, it'll be a little bit under 3. So we'll get about a third of their taxes, and then the school district, which is Sun Prairie, will get about half. Usually school districts are about half, and the county will get their 15-ish%, something like that, and then the tech school the remainder.
So you're talking like the 7 million, and then MMSD gets a third, and
The Sun Prairie School District.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
So the 35% max for the mixed use type, I'm just curious how a building like where Grace Coffee is that considered residential or is that considered commercial? How does that contribute to the 35%?
I think that was something they just clarified in the recent law changes, that it's not counted, so it's a 35, but Rick, is that your recollection?
I think the 35% has to do with platted lands, so the like the apartment or the mixed-use building. If I recall correctly, it doesn't get counted towards it. It's more geared towards like platted.
I think it's like more single fam. A lot of it's more single family based homes, so a lot of those are looked at still as a commercial project.
Okay.
And the important thing to note is it's at time of creation. Again, that should be the intent, that it really should never be more than 35%, but it doesn't surprise me if a district's created and it ends up being, the commercial and industrial never develops, but the single family does. Well, it could be 80% of the, final area is actually residential. Is that 35% is at creation?
Okay. And then, so we're currently at 23.31% of equalized value. Do you know what that's going to be after TID 5 closes?
About 26%. I did the rough math. So with TID 5 closing and TID 10 coming on the same exact year, I had really hoped there was going to be a buffer year to evaluate, if there was another TID district required, but it ended up just happening at the same time.
Do you know what percent is going to be Amazon of that?
So roughly 400, increment will be roughly 380. Wow. So enough where it's very, and I kind of alluded to this to an email to the board. The state has allowed it by, a legislation exemption. I will caution that you better have a good reason for the legislation exemption. So an example of where that might be, like you have a significant employer in the community that's going to leave. And so in order to allow them to expand, to be able to stay, legislation has jumped in. The most recent example of that is in Middleton. They didn't end up moving forward with the expansions, but those are the kind of things that we could explore. Or the other area where it's been successful is you've painted a picture for 3 or 4 years that this is our vision for this area and it's consistent and it doesn't change. And you kind of get some support from your representatives.
Okay. So, I mean, effectively, we're not going to be able to create any new TIDs until Amazon closes.
I did the rough math. Depending on what appreciation is, 2032 was kind of where value outside of the TIDs may be more or may jump us out of that 12%. It just really depends on really what residential appreciation looks like in other development areas.
But this doesn't count the residential TIDs.
Oh, correct.
Right.
Yeah. And when the village went through a pretty thorough process when in 2017, when 8, 9, and 10 were created, to look at our entire contiguous and possible areas for TID, and those were really it. Outside of, you could look now and maybe you could add, there might be some amendments to those areas where you might want to add a couple parcels, but by and large, strategically, those were, we really felt covered the village for the next couple decades at that time, at least.
Okay. But after it closes, we'll be able to make pretty much however many we want, right? Okay. Is there any way, and I know this is probably a long shot, but is there any way to close that TID and then just create another TID that doesn't include Amazon?
We'd have to meet the obligations first, so we'd have to, all of the ongoing project costs out there would have to be paid for. And there's, something short of $50 million of work out there and, about $7 million of annual revenue. So, yeah, the quickest would be if
More
there's
than
no
7
other.
years, right?
Yeah.
Just over 7. Yes. Okay, I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Just kind of strategy-wise, I've seen communities do it kind of 2 different ways from how do you create a district. Some communities have like 20 plus districts, and they create districts in 1 or 3 or 4 parcels, smaller districts, to be able to do this, to close districts faster. However, every district there's administrative cost to, from a DOR perspective, from a management, from a compliance perspective. I don't believe it's the most cost-effective way to create districts. It really reduces your flexibility when you're within the district. So the broader areas, in our sense, help. Now, where we're at, we can't increase the boundaries, but there's likely going to be a couple TID amendments that come down the way. Because when TID 10 was created, nobody knew this was going to be a $400 million project. So there might be some revisions here in the future, similar with TID 9. TID 9 was not anticipated to be this successful either.
Just a note on the school district boundaries. So I know that we hear in the community quite a bit about the tax revenue going to the Sun Prairie schools, but the village doesn't draw school district boundaries. The school district doesn't draw the boundaries. It's really up to Department of Instruction that does all of that. And we don't have any negotiation power in moving that.
Didn't we have an Monona Grove School District representative on that TID creation committee?
It would have been Sun Prairie for that TIF district.
Why do I feel like my memory that Jared Rosing was part of one of those?
Because we were creating TID 8, 9, and 10 at the same time, so
Okay.
he wouldn't have voted on TID 10
TID 10,
because that was in the
okay.
Sun Prairie School District, but he would have voted on 8 and 9. Yep.
Fun fact, TID 5, the voting members decided at the value at creation. The TID 5 had more value in the Sun Prairie District at the time that it was created, but now has more, obviously exponentially more value in Monona. So it's just kind of fun fact when you hear the voting record on that Sun Prairie officials were voting on and approving the annual plans or the annual updates for that district.
That is interesting. Thanks for the presentation. I guess my question goes into, as we're looking at going into budget season, and we're looking at the 2033 expenditure period, will we see potentially some projects coming in this year, or is that still more in the works in the coming years that might be TID eligible? Like, will that be noted as we're talking about like funding for different projects?
Great question. So they won't be included in this cycle. Typically, the goal of the long-term plan is to identify things that are either going to be granted or levied for, or obviously borrowed for. Typically, developer contributed. It's so tough, as you've seen with other developments. They come in and out and in and out. And so we've had more questions about certain development infrastructure, like why all of a sudden it's a priority. Well, it's always been a priority. It's just whenever that development happens, it has to get done. However, we can talk about how we maybe present that, in the FMP, like, key infrastructure and then TID funded. Definitely.
Yeah, because, we're taking out, if we have TID funded infrastructure that is being paid for by increment, but it still counts on our GO debt calculation, is that?
Depending on the infrastructure, that's a situation that would probably go contrary to funding normal capital. We'd probably save up in the TID to cash fund those improvements as opposed to borrow. But yes, you could do it on two. It would be more expensive. So like TID 5, for example, when we bought all that land and did all those, we did mortgage bonds, which don't count against your GO. But again, investors view that as more risky, so you have a higher interest rate. Could do something similar if we really wanted to for the infrastructure improvements. But yeah, the goal would be to try not to use debt capacity, especially in that time frame, because we're talking about needing an EMS or fire satellite station or other major improvements around that time.
But generally, there isn't a lot of cash flow early in the TIF district, so we're always going to be recommending that the developer fronts the infrastructure and we reimburse them as their revenue comes in. And then if they end up not meeting expectations, they have to pay a shortfall. And we usually do that we're usually able to do that, successful doing that with no interest. So we're not paying any interest on those. They're essentially called tax increment revenue bonds. So that's worked out really well. And then sometimes later, when a TIF district is nearing completion, we may have cash on hand, and that's when we might do something upfront and still have the developer provide a guarantee. But that's when we can move things along a little bit quicker.
Yeah, to clarify, TID 8, there's going to likely be some stormwater improvements that are going to need to be financed when that needs to be moved forward. Mostly because most of what needs to be done is really an improvement that has been identified on why that district was created. TID 10, for example, we've really accomplished most of the infrastructure that needs for that specific building. So that's where we would maybe try to save up to kind of, I think Matt did a good job clarifying that one.
Yeah, so like an intersection within a half mile that needs improvement, we could cash fund that with increment on hand, not borrow and pay back as we gather increment.
Or over time, as Amazon, the improvements pay for themselves, the additional investments in that district that we could be proactive on and potentially try to close the district sooner versus waiting for a developer, or who knows, in the next couple of years, maybe a developer comes and is able to guarantee value that can pay for infrastructure even quicker. But the continuation of utilities up north of TT to connect to what's now the Stoffager property, which is 70 acres north of Amazon. And then there's a planned road that would head west to the Houston parcel that's also in TIF District 10. So those are kind of the two, I should say there's also a lift station that's planned out there. So a lift station, water and sewer main, and a pretty significant size road to connect Main Street back to, or County N west to the Houston parcel in that TIF district. Those would be kind of the three main infrastructure projects that remain for that TIF district.
And that's why those annual cash pro formas that are done as part of the joint review board meeting are so important. It helps us project future anticipated revenue, allows us to guide those decisions on resources available.
And if you're curious, the next joint review board meeting is on October 1st at 5 o'clock, 4:30, something like that. Okay. Thank you for the presentation. Any remaining questions or comments from board members before we move on? Okay. We're going to move on to unfinished business, which is discuss and consider adding no parking signage on the southern portion of Bus Road. There's attachment and then also some pictures in the agenda, so I'll turn it over to Kyla.
Yeah, so included in their packet is kind of some background and overview of the Shady Grove subdivision and what the plans were for this 100-foot right-of-way boulevard section back in 2022 when the subdivision was created. There is a 100-foot right-of-way. There's a boulevard section through there. Long-term planning indicates that eventually this bus road could be a connection point from Gaston down to Vilas. And back when this development was approved, it was looked at, let's have a larger right-of-way, more of a boulevard section, slow people down, but have it almost as a main arterial section through there. Out of the meeting from last month, per the request, I reached out to fire and EMS, and I also provided PD's response as well. That's included in the packet that all three recommend no parking through there. There's some pictures also associated in the packet as well that kind of show EMS and fire engine vehicles with a parked car from a local contractor as well. Any questions for me?
I would move approval of adding no parking signage to the southern portion of Bus Road from West Cottage Grove Road to the dead end in the Shady Grove neighborhood.
I'll second the motion.
Motion by Severson, second by Buenzo. Open it up for discussion. Chris.
Yeah, I still don't think we should do this. It's like I've said before, it would make it way too wide. Cars will go a lot faster. The streets will be a lot less safe. I mentioned last time there's 60,000 car trips per day in the village. Last year there were 900 fire and EMS calls. I don't think we should be designing our roads for rare events while at the same time making them more common events less safe.
Kyla, can you verify that there's sidewalk on either side of the boulevard?
Yes, so there is a bike path all the way from Cottage Grove Road all the way south to the dead end. And then there is on the east side, northeast side, depending on which way you're looking. And then there is sidewalk on the west side from Drumlin Ridge south. So there's stormwater infrastructure where there is not sidewalk that connects all the way up to Cottage Grove Road. I can show my screen if you'd like.
Can you do that, please?
Yes.
I just know that this is probably going to be a connection point for kids walking and biking to school, right? And crossing at that intersection. You want to make sure that they're not also in the road. Mm-hmm. Unless we're going to put bike path or something.
So there is the bike path here along the east side of Bus Road that goes all the way down to the end. Once Heyday is completed, their bike path is already installed and there will be a crossing here at Cottage Grove Road and Bus Road. And then there is sidewalk that starts here at Drumlin Ridge and goes south on Bus Road to the end.
Yeah, so just a couple more stats, I guess. Like I said last time, when lane widths are 3.3 feet greater, speeds are predicted to be 9.4 miles an hour faster, and this would increase the travel lane by 8 feet. So that's almost 20 miles an hour faster. Chance of death for pedestrians in a motor vehicle crash is 5% at 20 miles an hour, 50% at 30 miles an hour, and 85% at 40 miles an hour. So making a wider road here and but psychologically permitting cars to move faster there is much, much less safe for pedestrians. And I get that the emergency departments want this to be easy for them to get through. You know, that's their job. They got to focus on what's right for them. But as you know, we're not specialists like they are. We're generalists. We have to see how these different things go together. And I just don't think, I mean, there's not that much parking on there now. And to say that, you know, a poorly parked car could prevent them from going through, that's designing our built environment there based on a rare event, on a rare event, on a rare event at the expense of the common everyday car trips. So I guess I would ask that we vote this motion down.
So I would just add, I'm on Public Works, and the Public Works Committee voted 5-1 to approve this. And I was the one who asked the question about emergency vehicles. So I know there's statistics about pedestrians and so forth, but I also think of the emergency response statistics of fire doubling in size every minute and other things. And I just think we need to do this. They need to be able to get into that subdivision quickly for either a person in distress or a fire, or, you know, as Chief Gary mentioned, if there ever would have to be bigger police equipment, tactical, that sort of thing. I really think that if our emergency services are agreeing on this, we should follow their lead.
Just a few more statistics. Approximate annual deaths nationwide. Motor vehicle crashes, 39,000. Pedestrians killed by vehicles, 7,300. Fire deaths, 3,700.
Chris, excuse me, Chris, can you define what age group that is? What you're just referring to?
For the deaths?
Yes, for motor vehicle accidents, because there's different percentages for different age groups.
This is just all ages, all 39,000 deaths per year of all ages.
Okay, so that might not even be related to situations like we're discussing.
Well, pedestrians killed by vehicles, 7,300, compared to fire deaths, 3,700. It's still higher than the fire deaths.
Go ahead, Casey.
Chris, I know we've talked about, like, in other roads, you know, traffic calming measures, you know, slowing things like that, and boulevards is usually one of the ones that comes up as well too. Like, this part of Bus Road is pretty windy. Do you feel like if we did go forward with this motion, would you be inclined for, like, even more traffic calming in addition to the boulevard?
I would certainly be open to it. I think we'd have to talk to our Public Works Department, because I am okay with speed humps, but they
sure.
tend to have
I'm not
issues
saying
with
that specifically. I know that's come up too. I'm just thinking, because you know, I went out and took a look at this, and we've got the pictures here. It is, because I agree that the whole, you know, the feel of the road is usually what tends to affect drivers more than, you know, posted speed limits and stuff. But a windy boulevard like this, I feel like that significantly mutes the effect here. And the other thing too is having some parking on that. I think that also contributes to you know, pedestrians and bikers, especially younger ones, having trouble seeing cars. Whereas if there's no parking, everyone has clear lines of sight, everyone can stay on the sidewalks and the bike paths. I think that would keep things pretty separate.
I think you're right about the windy road. It definitely does help that it's a windy road, but I mean, you also have to think about induced demand. If you make it harder to walk, less safe to walk, you're going to have fewer walkers, and it's not going to matter if they can see or not if they don't feel safe walking there.
You think even on the sidewalk?
I mean, yeah, the sidewalk's good, but there's crosswalks and stuff there too.
Okay.
Are there painted crosswalks on that first residential street there?
No, but it is on my list to capture. When we repaved it in 2024, there were pavement markings, and then they have not been addressed. It's on my list.
Okay. What other traffic calming measures would be options, Kyla?
I mean, like it was mentioned, I mean, the Boulevard section is one of those typicals, the winding road. It's not a straight thoroughfare. As Chris mentioned, we could look at speed humps. We could go back to Public Works in general and kind of brainstorm of additional traffic calming solutions. It isn't a heavily traveled road at this time. It's just when you drive it's tight.
As if this board moves forward with putting up no parking signs, would a traffic study or some data collection on traffic speeds happen first before we maybe take it back to Public Works and use that data to inform additional calming measures? Is that the proper order of operations here?
Yes, at this point in time. Yep.
Heidi?
I guess oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no.
My question on that is what would the traffic study, what would your parameters be for that? Because, I mean, no, sorry, what would the parameters be for that?
At this,
Sorry, because I know, I mean, if you're looking at level of service, this road isn't busy enough to even worry about congestion. So it's not, I don't really see the point of doing a traffic analysis if that's what we're going to make the parameters, because it's not going to be congested at this point. So,
Well, I guess my thought was the speed, just looking at average speed.
and that I can do internally. That
Okay.
would be something I would
Okay.
put our traffic counter up,
Yeah.
and we would do it internally to capture speeds through there.
Heidi, go ahead.
Thanks. I guess my question goes back to so we have a 100-foot road right-of-way. So rather than moving all the curb, is there an opportunity to move like some pockets out so then there would be some opportunity to park a few cars? And maybe we're not moving a whole lot of curb, but like, 3 or 4 car lengths. I'm thinking like up in West Lawn, we kind of have those bump outs and then people park next to them. So that gets the car out of like that. I don't know. And maybe that's, a longer term capital discussion, but maybe it's lower cost that we can get a few parking spots along there.
So what's difficult with that is the way the medians are constructed right now is if, like, I don't know if you can kind of see up here at the corner. If you kind of created a bump out here, we've already created the median with the bump out to have that pedestrian refuge, which is kind of what those bump outs do, is the pedestrian refuge, not necessarily just for the traffic calming. In terms of moving curb, you would, quite frankly, honestly be looking at shortening up the median. That's where we're gonna get the most relief. This way we're not taking storage away from snow and you're not pushing you're not pushing cars closer to the pedestrian bike paths and sidewalks. You kind of want to keep that terrace as wide as you can. So my recommendation would be to shorten that median that we just installed curb on in 2024.
And so a vehicle could drive on top of curb, but it's kind of tall and it could damage vehicles. Is there a way to make the curb shorter so then a vehicle can drive on it?
So it already is a mountable curb, so it doesn't have the full curb head. It's kind of, there's a picture of it that I could pull up if you're interested. It's more of a mountable is what it's called. And so you're able, I don't know if this picture has it. So you can kind of see how it's flatter. So it is drivable. If you need to, you can jump that curb. One reason we installed the curb through Public Works and Village Board when we had additional monies in 2024 was the development was approved with this as a 2-foot shoulder, and we were having people park in the median, and we were not able to go grass. We were not able to have trees. We were having a lot of traffic issues associated with that.
Yeah, I remember that. So currently, if there's a car parked there, a vehicle would jump, like a response vehicle, a delivery vehicle, whoever is trying to get through that can't get by, would then jump the curb and drive on the median, and their vehicle would generally, some of these vehicles are quite large, so those are meant to do that.
Yes, in a way, you could have the damage associated with the car, the maintenance behind jumping a curb every single time. It also depends on parking. If everyone could park perfectly in an ideal world, then you have more space, but as we all know, I don't always park perfectly, so.
And the snow plows probably would have then the same, trying to remove snow around a parked car on any width street is, a
Correct.
challenge, so, okay.
But that's why we have alternate side parking in the winter that everyone should pay attention to. Chief Lane, can you provide us with some insights?
I think an additional perspective to have is the fundamental way access point is a right in, right out. The quickest route for us to respond to this particular development is from our building up Main Street to Cottage Grove Road, and then Bus Road to the south being our most direct and only way in. An ambulance can probably make a U-turn illegally into the right in, right out. A police vehicle certainly can do that. I'm not sure a fire truck could, or you'd want them to. So having been out there and being able to get the fortuitous thing of parking a vehicle relatively normally and having a private contractor not want to go past, I think that's enough evidence to say that we shouldn't have parking on the street. And consider creative measures like, can we paint a bike lane? Can we, speed humps, they're not fun in an ambulance, especially if you're the patient, but if it happens, it happens.
Chief Gary, I don't know if you have any other additional comments.
I think it's all been talked over and well covered. Unfortunately, just in the way things are laid out there, parked vehicles, I understand what you're saying, Trustee Stoya, is a calming factor, but it also, from the police department, is a hindrance for those that are playing in the area and their observations of the roadway and the traffic that's moving.
I don't know if Chief Archibald's online. No. Okay.
I get, first of all, I agree about fundamental way. I think we should fix that because I don't think it makes any sense anymore. But as far as being able to see things, I mean, if you take that argument to its logical conclusion, we should cut down all the trees that are lining all our streets because they're blocking people's views too. In the end, I mean, I looked at the pictures and it's tight. Excuse me, it's tight, but it doesn't look unmanageable, and it looks like the ambulance vehicle isn't even parked all the way up on the curb. So, I guess I don't really have any more to add, other than the fact that I think the biggest takeaway we should have from this is that we should build these streets right in the first place and not be piecemealing it together afterwards. So Newman, I'm going to ask about street widths when you guys come up later. Yeah, that's
JP, do you want to add something before we consider?
Yeah, kind of going off of, well, first off, a lot of my questions were already discussed by other trustees or asked by other trustees. But going off of Chris's last point here is, I do want to call out in the memo that the ordinance we passed only a month ago, does not specifically address roadway sections with medians in how that would affect. So kind of thinking forward ahead, do we also, as part of the motion, need to give staff direction in there to look at our ordinance to see if anything needs to be addressed to prevent this from happening again?
I would think that would be a good addition. And I have one other, that Public Works take a look at other traffic calming measures in this area. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no.
If I would be interested in maybe having that added if the motion makers are.
Friendly amendments.
Yes.
If Rick says it's okay, I'll add it.
If you're all comfortable with it, we can do it that way.
Okay. Are you okay with the second then, Renee? All right, there's a motion and a second on the table to approve the adding of no parking signage to the southern portion of Bus Road from Cottage Grove to Road to the dead end in the Shady Grove neighborhood, with the addition of asking Public Works to consider additional calming measures as well as investigating some of our ordinance changes that may be due to roadways. All right, if there's no more discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? No. Abstain? Motion carries. Good discussion, everyone. All right, moving on, new business. Discuss and consider block party application for 400 East School Road. Kyla's still.
There's block party application included in the packet for 400 School Road for Saturday, June 27th from 11 a.m. until 9 p.m. Fire, EMS, Public Works, and Police have all signed off on it to move forward with the approval.
Yeah.
I would move approval of the block party application as presented.
Second.
Motion by Murphy, second by Severson. Any other discussion on the block party application? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. Discuss potential changes to the joint NADVIG landfill committee. This is just for feedback, no actual consideration here. But I am bringing this forward after some discussion with another trustee. Currently the committee is meeting every other month for a total of maybe 5 to 10 minutes to look at standard landfill reporting and bill payments, which ultimately come back to the village board and the town board respectively. We could amend, if both town and village agree, the agreement to kind of restructure options. One of those potential options could be to move to an annual meeting where the two entities could get together and review monitoring and reporting and overarching financial expenditures, or if anything has to be done. But you could still, bill approvals could occur routinely, as we already do. Another option could be to dissolve the joint landfill committee and wrap that then into either probably Public Works, and that would include staff and engineering review, and then bills would be the same, and the town could do what would work best for them. So those are just, we can also not change it at all. We could also go to quarterly meetings as is actually written into the agreement. So those are just options to bring forward. I think that there's some duplicative administrative processes right now of, approving and then reapproving by pretty much the same entities, and just an opportunity for some efficiencies here. The other attachment in here is just the joint landfill agreement from 2006 for historical perspective. Rick.
So I guess just a couple of comments just to start out. So obviously, I don't know why I did that. So obviously this is a joint agreement with the town, so that this is all, it has to be in conjunction with the town, so this isn't just something that we can unilaterally change. So I don't know the full backstory about where this whole dispute arose, but apparently there was some lawsuit and the agreement settled that dispute, and they've been doing this for a number of years now. So there's an option to amend basically once a year the settlement agreement. The case is done, so we don't really need any court approval, but it's just whatever the town is willing to agree to. So, I guess I would just say if you want big changes, that those might be harder to do because we have to work with the town on this. Simpler changes, for just adjusting meeting schedules, that is certainly a quick fix, but I just don't want to get the impression that whatever we decide tonight, that's going to be the way it is moving forward, because we obviously have to work with the town.
Go ahead, Chris. Oh, sorry. Renee had her, I think she maybe had her microphone on. Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Thank you for that, Rick. That I was going to clarify that is that a unilateral decision by the village certainly does not seem appropriate, and especially to the agreement. So I think having a discussion with the town is really important. And we briefly discussed that, Chair Anders. And really, since nothing's broke, I mean, what is there really to fix was kind of, I can't speak for the town. I mean, we just had kind of curbside consult. But the committee wasn't really created because of the lawsuit, from my understanding. It was created because both municipalities recognized that the landfill accepted stuff from all other communities other than just the village. So monitoring it jointly and communication long after the litigation, I think, keeps transparency, it keeps good communication between the town and the village, rather than the village just trying to overrun and kind of direct what should be done. So yes, the meetings are short. But no news is good news too. Things have been stable. I don't know that, it's been my understanding since being on this committee that there has not been any DNR concerns, and we would really like to keep it that way. So I guess I would really like to know what actual problems and what specific costs are of concern before we would consider fixing anything that doesn't appear to be broke at the moment.
Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree that we should do whatever the town is willing to do with us, and we should keep whatever financial obligations we have per the agreement. I personally would like to see it go from a committee to staff monitoring. I don't think the meeting is a productive use of time. Essentially, you show up and they say, "Here's the bills. Okay, looks great. Let's go." I just don't think that's a very good use of time, and I think anything that were to come up, staff would notify us of in a timely manner anyway. I completely understand if they don't want to do that, and we should be willing to work with them if they want to change the frequency of the meetings. That's fine too. But my own personal perspective is that the committee meetings are superfluous.
Yep, like the agenda item says, it's just for feedback at this point. Heidi?
Yeah, I would say we should add it to the meeting when we have the joint meeting, talk about it. When we meet about the results of the study. I think that if some results came up in the midst of, we only meet every 2 months, that we would be, notified, and call a special meeting if there were suddenly some results that were, needed to be addressed. So if we had like an annual review and then met if something concerning came up, it does have resources to post an agenda and post the minutes, and for both the town and the village, since we both have to post agendas and minutes. So I think it'd be worth a conversation, see where the town's at on it.
I would agree with that. Just opening up the conversation doesn't hurt. We also have a former village president in the audience, so if we needed any more historical information, I'm sure Mr. Conklin could share that with us as to kind of the history behind this. But I think just asking the town and seeing what they might be amenable to is a good first step.
Casey?
I'm in consensus for feedback only. I'm more inclined to start with the option 2 to dissolve it and roll it into Public Works. I don't think we lose anything. It's still the same monitoring. We still have all the same, accountability and safeguards and everything. It just doesn't have to be a separate subcommittee that obviously costs more than using the existing one. That said, of course, if the town would rather keep it but go to annual or whatever they'd like to do, certainly work with them. But I'd say start with 2 and fall back to 1 if they want to keep that.
And I think it's important to remember that we're not trying to, I don't think anybody wants to make it seem like we're trying to take over sole monitoring. It would still be a joint thing. We're not trying to get out of any financial obligations that we might have. We're just...
This is just an efficiency measure.
Yeah.
Cindy, just one comment. If they choose to go down to 1 meeting, my only ask or feedback would be to try to schedule that in September. Very similar to Flint Hall, because that's when budgets are established to both the town and the village. So just making sure that's meaningful on the time when it's had.
Yeah, JP.
Well, and the other part of that timing is typically we get the annual report in July. Or they do the study and we may get in July, if not August. So then that timing does kind of conclude in there. So at the same time, I would echo what's been said in here, and that it's the whole point is to have a conversation. We're, again, open to discussion to figure out what works best for both municipalities. And also just saying, if we can think of another option that is not listed here that would work, then by all means, I for sure would be open to discussing that as well.
I think that's enough direction in restructuring the preference from the majority of the board, and I'll, be in communication with Steve, and then we can put it on the joint agenda when that meeting happens. All right, thank you for that. We'll move on to discuss emergency services building lease agreement options and potential direction to staff and legal counsel. So there is a memo, and then the current fire district agreements for historical reference also listed in the agenda. Fire agreement section 6B, page 6, says that there will be a lease with the basically tenants of the emergency services building, and there isn't a formalized agreement at this point in time. Given that the village and town have both have a portion of the stakes involved in that, we could consider some additional governance, outlining responsibilities and long-term obligations. It'd likely be a lot different from a standard commercial lease. There's a list of things that could or maybe won't, aren't necessary, but just kind of brainstorming list in the memo of what could be considered in there. I think that it's, because we've never formally developed or executed it, it's probably important step to take, regardless of kind of who's the tenant in that building. But this is also just for direction tonight. Casey?
Yeah, I'll say, to start off with, the language is pretty clear that no entity shall use the building unless the town and village have approved a lease. We haven't, so we're out of compliance with this document. So we definitely need to clean that up from a legal perspective. And yeah, it will help clarify many, many things that are otherwise kind of vague and often require a lot of meeting time. So yes, I think this is an excellent idea.
Rick?
So I guess like the list that was in the memo, I think it covers a lot of the general things we'd be looking at. It would be certainly unique. I don't think we'd be looking to charge rent, because that's just going to be paid by the village regardless. So this is another one though where it's the village owns 59% of the building, or 41%. I forgot the percentage, but it's around a 60-40 split with the town owning the majority stake. So again, anything that we do has to be sort of in conjunction with the town. But we can, if that's the direction of the board, is to work to try to establish leases with the fire department and EMS, that's something we can work with their attorney on to just try to formulate. But it's, essentially just trying to establish, what are areas is each entity responsible for? What are the common areas and the rights and responsibilities? Any insurance requirements, responsibilities for repairing damage, obviously because we've got EMS, which includes more municipal partners, and the fire district is just the 2 municipal partners. So it makes sense to just try to clarify those rights and responsibilities, especially just from how you apportion those costs among the partner organizations. So, I guess I don't have any other specific comments. We can kind of work with the bullet point list that we have here, but if there's any other specific direction, we can certainly bring that forward.
I guess I would just kind of back up a little bit and suggest that we put this on an agenda item to have a discussion with the town board first. We years ago, my last time on the board, had quarterly meetings where we would take up business like this and just kind of keep a dialogue happening, and I miss those days. I had said last year that I wished we did that more often, but I think if we go in with the approach that we've given our attorney directive to start drafting this lease agreement, and here you go, town, it won't be well accepted, just based on my decades of working with the town board. So I think a better approach would be put it on a joint agenda. I mean, the other piece is really, this should be shared cost with them, right? So any attorney fees of working on this. And so getting them on board early in the process and allowing them to feel like they have a say in the matter, and actually they do, I mean, they own 60% of the building, would be a better approach to take rather than kind of imposing this on them. That's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, important. Both of these memos were given to Steve for discussion. He gave me feedback on only the previous agenda item and going down in meeting numbers. So, and they don't have it on their agenda at all, but they're in the loop on it at least.
But it's an opportunity when we meet together to just have us all sit at the same table and sing from the same hymnal right away. So
yeah, I think
that would
when
be
I
my
had
approach.
written my memo, I had assumed that they would also discuss, and then we could use I think in both memos, the joint village town meeting to kind of accomplish some additional tasks. And maybe that will come up because I'll announce it later on about the joint meeting. But we're going to have extra time. But obviously didn't want to put something on the agenda that this board was also not interested in discussing. Casey?
I was just going to clarify, yeah, that the end of your memo says this could be on the joint town-village meeting on the 30th, Paul. So I think, yeah, we're giving the feedback now, but yes, this should be at a joint meeting like that.
Any other comments, Heidi?
Just from, my first year on fire committee, I do see that it would be very beneficial to have some of those roles and things defined, because I think having people in the building, and then now we're adopting policies for service animals and such, like, I think it would be nice to have this kind of overarching agreement so everybody's on the same page on who they need to go to, what expectations are. I think it could be beneficial. So I look forward to having that conversation then at the joint meeting.
Cameron?
Just relevant because we're doing the prioritization. Because the maintenance and capital fell on the fire commission, I think this puts undue pressure on our fire chief to provide a capital replacement and expenditure, and really, again, that position's volunteer. So I think really any type of lease agreement will really help solidify that and possibly identify some help where maybe that's not the person who has, or defined by a default, because obviously the village has a lot of full-time staff and things like that. So just making sure that they're not being asked to do things that they don't necessarily have the resources to do.
Okay. I think I'll start by just kind of summarizing this for the town chair, and we'll take it from there. Again, thank you for that feedback as well. All right. How about new business D, discuss and consider confirming village position as not negotiating with MGSD terms of lease or sale for Taylor Prairie School. Trustee Murphy.
Yep, thank you. And thank you, President Kelm-Nelson, for helping on this item memo, because I think as you've been following, I'm sure many of you, the school district's conversations around their buildings and, of course, with sharing buildings, much like we do on fire with the town, we share with Monona and the town and, other pockets of our school district buildings. So with the closing of Taylor Prairie, it was reported by their staff to their board that we had some kind of official position that we wouldn't be interested in leasing or purchasing Taylor Prairie School for some municipal use. So because I think it can be interpreted that that would be, an easy, resourceful way to offer a new service in the village. So we do have a lot of barriers to getting there. So I thought it would be helpful to kind of talk about this topic as a board together so we can, I guess, have that conversation at a public meeting about some of those challenges that would, in my opinion, make that not feasible for the village to do right now. So I laid some of those out in a memo, going from, a lease would add to our operating expenses. We have levy limits. So to go over those operating expenses, we'd need a referendum. If we utilize that space and then the Taylor Prairie has to reopen for students, then we've established these programs that then need a new home as soon as they need to start using the school again. With the building of the police department, the new station, we'll have space that they're vacating at MSB that will be able to be backfilled by some things. So I think it'd be beneficial, as that gets closer, to kind of develop a little bit of a plan on how that looks. And of course, our geo debt to buy the building, and then the school district wouldn't have that building to reopen if they need it in the future. I don't think their staff is recommending sale of the building at this time. There's also deferred maintenance on that building, so if that would be our responsibility to then take on that maintenance. And the school district has also not recommended a sale, hasn't presented a plan to us on what they might be leasing, or looking to sell. So there also hasn't been a plan brought forward by them to the board on a proposal. So I guess that's just kind of summarizing my memo. And I thought it would be a good conversation to have among the board. So those are the reasons why I feel we should affirm this position with the district, but I guess with the chair to open it up for conversation.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to collaborate on this. I know there's several of us on the board that follow the school district pretty closely and received the communication earlier. Was that last week already? Kind of the wrapping up of the school year, and then kind of some of the decisions that came out of the school board meeting from last week. And I think that this summarizes it pretty well. So I'll open it up for additional conversation. And while I wish there weren't all of these barriers and we could have a use for and keep, add to the community like service profile, it's tough. And there's a lot of barriers to it. And I know that they're still deciding, not for this coming school year, but keeping that or moving some of the other programming that occurs in the district to Taylor Prairie based on some of the decisions that they make in Monona.
Well, I appreciate you bringing this forward. I agree with everything you laid out as to why it wouldn't work right now, particularly with our debt load. I think two things. Last year, I also kind of requested, when I requested joint meetings with the town, with the school board, and I guess I'll just reiterate that request. I think it would be helpful for us as a governing body to meet with them, even if it's just annually or biannually, something where we can have future conversations with another governing body to make sure we're kind of marching in the same step. The other piece I think that's important, particularly in this conversation, is how do we as a governing body know when staff makes inquiries to staff, right? So if somebody from the school board or staff reaches out, how do we know that it's something that's kind of being decided that really should be a governing body decision? So I think that's kind of one of the underlying themes that's a challenge for me. And that's not necessarily just on your memo in this particular motion, but just in general.
I think just to be clear, we're never deciding anything as staff, so we're just providing feedback. But in this case, there's communication that we can tighten up and will tighten up. But at the end of the day, unless we have different direction from the board, our assumption and feedback and recommendation to anyone to ask us about it, any new service, is that it's unlikely to be feasible because we need a referendum. So that's kind of and we follow the policies and plans and prioritization and financial management plan that the board carries out there. So if there's no forthcoming plans for new service or desire for additional buildings, then we'd provide that feedback. We'd also, if they want to, the person that's making, in this case, an entity, but whomever's coming forward, we're always giving them the feedback of, this is our feedback. If you want to pursue it, here's how you do that. And it's usually going to a committee and coming back to the board. In this case, the school district didn't do any of that.
Casey?
I think too, in this instance, I mean, the whole phrasing on, so I was at that school board meeting, and the whole phrasing of, oh, this is the official response of the village. No one at the village said that this was an official response. That's just what the staff member at the school board, you know, how they wrote it on their agenda. So we don't have any control over that. Like, and, you know, yeah, maybe they should have phrased it differently, but what they were informed by staff was accurate. We don't have any, you know, projects pending that would go there. We don't, you know, any new services would require a referendum, and we don't have anything planned for that. So I think that staff communicated appropriately and correctly. And I think if we as trustees, you know, ever feel like, oh, that we missed some information, we should reach out to staff. I mean, as we, you know, had in the presentations 1 or 2 meetings ago, you know, while I'm still maintaining quorum, we can email Matt, and he can forward it on to the relevant parties, and then BCC the entire village board, and that preserves, you know, the quorum and in compliance with open meetings laws. So I think that's how, you know, if something like this happens again, of course, as we go, you know, as the school board continues with what they're doing, that's where that ought to be. In terms of this specific agenda item, I also agree that, yeah, we should, you know, now that we are here with quorum, I'm inclined to agree that we do affirm this position for all the reasons that you put in the memo, Heidi. Because, yeah, it would be, whatever would go there is temporary. It would have to be temporary, and I don't see anything that could possibly fit that bill. I think also, again, so I was at that meeting. I've been to pretty much all the school board meetings since the start of the year here. I think the only reason that they sort of broached it is because the building they're looking at, the building that's most likely to be the one they're selling currently has wrap care for the city of Monona, and this was just sort of a parallel. So they were like, oh, well, would we want to do that here in Cottage Grove since we're not doing it in Monona? And, you know, they weren't aware of all the ins and outs of the village, you know, administration and referendum and stuff. So they just sort of asked that was what they had in mind, and not knowing that, no, that doesn't make sense here the way it did over in Monona. So I think that's sort of the background on that, but that's all.
Yeah, and it's, oh, sorry, go ahead. I already had an opportunity to speak, so you go ahead, JP.
Okay, appreciate it. In addition to what's been said here, I would just want to express a little bit of disappointment in all the entities that have been part of this discussion, and really, I just hope moving forward that folks can use some critical thinking skills to really think through and not really take things out of context and try to seek to understand what is being said in there, because I think in many ways, we're trying to convey the appropriate information. I do not think that every single decision should come up to a governing body. We should empower staff to help make decisions based on directions that we've given them. And at the same time, again, this is where I just hope moving forward that all entities that have been part of this really take a moment to think through the words that they use, because they can have an impact in who is saying it in what regards in there. That being said, I've also, as Cindy kind of alluded to, I'm also one of those members that's been following this very closely, because my family's directly impacted by this, as one of my children is moving from Taylor Prairie to Cottage Grove School and watching how all this plays out. And one other thing that it's been alluded to, but I'll say it explicitly in here, to pay attention to is, as part of the whole movement in potential buildings, with the school district, that hasn't even been settled yet. There's still, one of the proposals is on the table where the school district office and or MG21 could potentially move out here. So I know that is one area that they still need to work through. So, and they are doing that in the appropriate steps. But for me, that's just one other reason to pause. Like, that could just be a year. So I would be very hesitant to move forward to do any research about potential new service, about utilizing the building for anything in addition to what's been already laid out. But to say that even in the short term, we need to kind of pause to see where the school district ends up with all their facilities before we can even consider moving in any directions, and then that raises all the other points that's been brought up in the memo, among others.
Yeah, I just have a kind of overall follow-up. It seems, when you first start looking at this, like it's such a no-brainer, of course. Like, why wouldn't? But with our levy limit constraints and tied to net new construction, it takes so much thoughtful planning to just add one full-time position at the village. And so to think about starting a whole new service, a senior center or a youth center, or like it takes so much planning to like work that in. So of course we would need a referendum to add a new service there. That's the biggest barrier to adding new services, that ongoing operations cost. So at first it looks so simple. So I did really want to have this conversation tonight. So I appreciate all the feedback. I think it's important for the community to hear from us on like some of the challenges we do face, and why this might not be the right thing right now. And then the points about the school district isn't sure what their proposals are going to look like next year. So those kind of moving pieces, but just to communicate to the district, like, yes, officially this just can't be on the table for us right now. And yeah, I think it is similar to, since the city of Monona uses Maywood, so I think that definitely was like, well then, yeah, Cottage Grove would use Taylor Prairie. So I think that it's an important conversation.
Yeah, this is a discuss and consider. Entertain a motion.
Okay. I officially make the motion to recommend the village confirm that we are not open to pursuing a lease or purchase of Taylor Prairie School, and conveying that to the school board.
I'll second.
All right, motion by JP, second by Erlandson. Any other comments on this item? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. All right. Number 9, reports from village boards, commissions, and committees. First up is there was a joint utility commission and public works, properties, and sustainability committee. Chris.
There was a joint utility commission and public works, property, and sustainability committee meeting on Wednesday, June 10th at 5 p.m. We didn't have any public appearances. We approved the bills for the utility commission. We talked about the 2025 compliance maintenance annual report, which was we passed. We had a presentation by Strand on stormwater quality management plan update. We got the director's and engineering report. The utility commission adjourned. The public works then discussed the 2027-2036 street maintenance polarization plan and gave some feedback. We talked about the traffic impact analysis for the Monona Grove School District with the upcoming changes at CGS. And we adjourned.
Anything to add?
Well, I think we should probably go a step further about the traffic impact analysis with the schools, because they did do a traffic analysis, and the analysis said that the intersection of Wheeled Bridge, Taylor, and Main Street is going to fail in the morning.
I was going to suggest we put that on a future agenda, but if we want to talk about it now, I guess we can.
Well, I think it's important to note what the report was, because I think, we obviously approved the changes to the site plan and such with the school district before we had that information. I don't know if that would have changed anything, but I just think it's important to note that obviously we're going to have to solve for this.
Rick, should this be a future agenda item? And
Yes, I would say if the board wants to put on a future agenda, that'd be an appropriate way to handle that discussion. Just for open meeting purposes. It's hard to discuss it tonight.
any other comments about the joint meeting?
I would just put a plug in there. If you're interested in learning more about our stormwater maintenance and management program, I would highly recommend listening to Strand's presentation. It was linked in the agenda for their overview, but Dan Johnstone from Strand gives a really good detail of our stormwater management, how our TSS, our total phosphorus, how our credits are managed, and where our reaches are that kind of go into play here for our stormwater utility feasibility study that will be forthcoming here at Village Board.
And I'll go a step further. Homework for the capital prioritization plan. There was some really good discussion about why pulverization was scheduled for certain years, and some really good discussion at the committee level that I really appreciated hearing as staff as we're working on that plan. So I would recommend watching.
All right, everyone put that on your to-do list, please. We'll move on to Plan Commission. So a number of agenda items here for us to work through. But Plan Commission met on Wednesday, June 10th at 6:30. We had a presentation by Monona Grove student Ellie Meng regarding her Girl Scout Gold Award project related to bird safety. And the idea is that which maybe I'll send out to the link to the YouTube so that everyone can watch it because she did an excellent job. We're going to gather some more information and probably bring it back as a future agenda item, but the idea is to create an ordinance that would require developers over a certain number of square feet to include some bird safety measures on glass. She also is giving a presentation at the Monona Library. I think it's next week, Wednesday at 3:45 if you're interested in attending that as well. We then moved on to all the other things in Plan Commission, and those are the things that we have on our agenda tonight. So I think we'll just take them one by one. And then also I'll just state, in case I forget it, the next Plan Commission meeting is in July on the 15th. We moved that meeting around. And it's at 7 o'clock after the library board meeting. So the first public hearing that we had was regarding the request from Bryn Mawr Presbyterian Church for approval of a zoning map amendment to their parcels from planned industrial to SR4 single family residential. I know Bryn Mawr is here, but I'll turn it over to Aaron first for kind of a recap on that.
Yeah, so I think you'll recall last month we had a Bryn Mawr item. They were seeking approval of a CSM. There's currently 6 or 7 parcels there that they're trying to combine into 2. We put a condition on that CSM approval that they come back and get one of those parcels rezoned because there's one of them that's kind of an outlier there that's zone planned industrial instead of SR4. And they couldn't combine that with the other parcels because one parcel can't be in 2 different zoning categories. So that's what they're coming here tonight to do, is to get that rezoning so they can proceed with the CSM. I know there's some neighbors at the public hearing that had some concerns about what this might mean for development or redevelopment of the site. And that's really a separate issue. This rezoning doesn't make that any more or less likely to happen. It's just a function of trying to get the CSM accomplished.
Questions or comments on this particular discuss and consider?
I would move approval of the request from Bryn Mawr Presbyterian Church for approving of a zoning map amendment to rezone parcel 0711-162-8040-4 from planned industrial to SR4.
I will second.
All right, motion by Severson, second by Erlinson. Any other discussion on this item? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. All right, we then had a public hearing regarding a request from Little Genius Bilingual Learning Center for approval of a CUP to operate a group daycare of 9+ students at 400 Progress Drive, which was previously a daycare at that location. So we had the opportunity to hear from them at Plan Commission, and I'll turn it back over to Aaron for this discuss and consider.
Yeah, so Little Genius is looking at the building that's currently, or was currently occupied by Creative Kids Daycare on Progress Drive. That business closed, I believe, at the end of last week. So I think we're kind of fortunate that this new business is coming in to fill the void there pretty quickly thereafter. Little Genius owns a current site in Madison, so this would be their second operation. We do have the applicants here. Kent Yan is part of the entity that's buying the building, and then Genesis Villalobos is part of the ownership and operations of the business. So if you have questions, they're available, but basically they're using the building as it's been used for the past several years with no problems, so we would recommend approval.
Questions or comments from board members?
I would make the motion to
Alright.
approve the request from Little Genius Bilingual Learning Center for approval of the conditional use permit as presented.
I'll second.
All right, motion by Murphy, second by JP. Any other discussion on this item?
I just want to say I appreciate that they're looking to jump into the Cottage Grove area, especially knowing that early childhood education is very, I'd say, fraught environment at the moment in there, and with availability. And I definitely know that our residents and surrounding community will definitely appreciate having another option, especially a bilingual one as well.
And I would just say bienvenidos a Cottage Grove. Gracias por querer abrir aquí.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
See. Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. Thank you for being here tonight. All right. Then we talked about a request from Dunroven Ridge LLC for approval of Kennedy Hills Second Edition final plat located east of Kennedy Road in the town of Cottage Grove, and this is within our extraterritorial jurisdiction.
Yeah, so the preliminary plat for this was approved several years ago, and then they've just been getting the final plats approved in stages. So this is the third of three. It's consistent with our comp plan. It was identified as a future town development site going back, decades, and now it's getting filled in. It's consistent with the plan. It's consistent with the preliminary plat, so we'd recommend approval.
Comments or questions?
I just wanted to reiterate my comment that I made at Plan Commission, that this neighborhood has connectivity to the other portions of the neighborhood, which is so important for emergency services, for traffic flow, and I hope that in the future the town would consider that type of transportation availability between communities, not just that we plan it in our own areas, but that transportation needs to happen across borders too. So I hope that we can work together to find some solution to those in the future, because I think it's important for this neighborhood to have also. And I would make a motion to approve the request in the ETJ for Kennedy Hills Second Edition as presented.
I'll second.
All right, motion by Murphy, second by JP. Any other discussion on this item? Yes, JP, go ahead.
I just want to echo what Heidi mentioned in there as well as definitely appreciate the additional park space in there that they're looking to consider, especially knowing that some of our, it's Outlet 1 in particular, has that open field that could be used for multiple sports. I would say this board has heard from MGFC in particular about needing additional spots due to how lots of our communities looking to join from the soccer standpoint, but also knowing that also applies to other sports looking for open space to do as our parks are being heavily utilized at the moment.
Are you talking about the Kennedy Hills plat?
Oh,
Or the other
shoot,
one?
the other one, but yes.
Oh,
No,
forward
but
to
let's both.
Move that. Okay. All right, there is a motion and a second on this one already. So
It
all
is
those.
Kennedy Hills.
Okay. On the other one already. My bad. Good job. Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. Now we're going to, then we had a public hearing regarding a request from Newman Developments for approval of a preliminary plat for Juniper Fields, a proposed 108-acre, 226-unit, single-family residential subdivision. So we do have the Newman team here, and I invite you up to have a discussion with us. And then also, if you could just kind of maybe run us through your project, the plat, some of our, lead into some discussion. We can turn it over to staff. I know Ty and Aaron may have some additional comments, and take it from there.
Thank you. My name is.
Make sure you turn on one of the microphones.
Thank you. My name's Steve DeClean. I'm with Newman Companies, and this is my associate Ryan Fritsch. We've been here over the past, it feels like maybe 6 months or so, working on a subdivision that is now coming in as Juniper Fields. This is the third name, so sorry about that, but that's where we landed. The property's just kind of south and east of Quarry Ridge. It's currently, the preliminary plat on the agenda is for 226 lots, which you see here on this screen. The star of the show is the park in that western portion. That's a 13-acre park. We are in the planning stages for what exactly to put in there. I think that's going to be part of a public process. It's got a lot of connectivity to a lot of other developable areas. I think we've preserved all those things. This is it's subject to SR6 zoning. The first phase of this development would come in and on the northern end. The second phase would include the park. You know, at Plan Commission, the need came up for a traffic study to study impacts at Meyer Road and BB to the south, Main Street and North Lawn, and Main Street and School Roads. So I think most people have probably seen parts and pieces of this, and I'm looking forward to any questions and dialogue.
Aaron, do you want to add anything?
Sure. Let me pull up the staff report here. So there's two agenda items, as Cindy mentioned, the first being the preliminary plat, and the second would be the rezoning of the single-family parcel to SR6 and the stormwater and park parcels to park and open space. We recommend approval of the plat with a few conditions that are outlined in the report. First one, just a few notation details on the plat itself, the total area of the plat, finalizing street names instead of just kind of the lettered labels. We like to see the zoning of the adjacent parcels and then depth to groundwater shown on the plat. There's some objecting agencies the plat should be sent to just for their sign off. It sounds like there will be neighborhood covenants and a property owners association, so any documentation related to that, we just want to be able to take a look at. Working with Public Works and the village engineer on the desired right-of-way and pavement width on Matt Pass. Once again, as far as the street names, also making sure they're not similar to any existing streets in the village or adjacent communities, just so we don't have confusion for emergency responders. Condition number 7, we kind of talked through at the Plan Commission. I think we can take that one out. It was related to extending street C instead of providing street M where they're showing it, but there's some logic to having the street M, so I think we'll just take that one out. There's a small connection from the park that goes down to Street D. We'd like to see that continued across the street to the south, so that could eventually continue to any development to the south to allow another route up to the park that's kind of off street. Making sure curb radii match our ordinance, making sure there's opportunities for emergency vehicle access to the park through all the different extensions. We're continuing to work between our engineers and Parks Department and the development team on grading for Lot 5. So I think we're kind of zeroing in on a solution that works for everybody. And then just noting that this approval would take place upon the completion of the annexation into the village. So the Plan Commission approved that. We can't look at that at the board until we get our letter from the DOA. Unfortunately, the Department of Administration had some employee turnover, and I think the annexation that they put in a couple months ago got a little bit lost in the shuffle, but we should have that in time for the next village board meeting. So we could approve this now, but it wouldn't take effect until that annexation. And then as far as the zoning, also recommending approval. Likewise, the rezoning would not take effect until the final plat is approved. If there are any minor variations between this plat and the final plat, it's just assumed that the zoning districts will align with the final parcel boundaries. Then again, just noting park and open space zoning on the park and stormwater parcels. SR6 on the single-family parcels, and then there are some outlots that will eventually be residential parcels when the Bannigan property and some associated properties come in. Those would stay a rural holding for now until they're platted as developable residential parcels. So that's the planning conditions. We have Ty as our special guest engineer from Strand tonight. So Ty, if you want to go through your conditions, that would be great.
Sure, thanks, Aaron. Yeah, I'll just kind of give a summary of our memo that was in the packet. As Aaron mentioned, the parks kind of working, just that the developer continue to work with the Parks Director and Parks Committee on that outlot, working out grades and access to the streets, things like that. Let's see. Utilities, we had requested that, so there's a lift station that kind of serves just over about 2/3 of the lots at the south end of Meyer Road. We had just requested that be located closer to Meyer Road. This is in the eventual sewer shed of the Ridge lift station, so if and when that interceptor ever comes in, it would make sense to have this smaller lift station in line to be taken offline, and then hooked up to the future interceptor. Similarly, we talked about the force main for this lift station, where it should go. Kind of makes the most sense to discharge it to North Lawn. That's a gravity sewer downstream of there rather than up further to another lift station. And the developer seemed agreeable to that at Plan Commission as well. We actually have discussion later this week to discuss water main sizing. So there's some water mains that are upsized in the feeding streets. So just kind of seeing what is needed for the village needs on that. Let's see, there was some stormwater drainage comments that we had. Just to summarize, Aaron already mentioned Street M. So there's one of the reasons why it is where it is to kind of help get some overland flow into a right-of-way versus into a lot. After talking with the stormwater engineer, that made sense to leave it where it was. They had some watersheds that were split and diverting water to a different watershed, so we had asked that they look at the grading to kind of address that and keep the water going where in its initial watersheds. On the northeast side, again, there's some overland flow kind of grading that we want them to kind of take more of a look at the southwest side of the plat, and making sure there's a defined swale for the overland flow routes of that offsite water. So that has a place to go. Right away and street comments. We had talked about Matt Pass. So they had shown it with 42 feet of pavement. That's currently wider than the village ordinances for a collector. That would be 40 feet face to face. And then we had also asked that they increase that right away to 70 feet if it is to remain a collector, just to keep snow storage and trees and terraces kind of have more room for that. Let's see. We had some minor drafting comments on the plat. We had talked a little bit of Plan Commission about putting hammerheads or temporary turnarounds at the end of each phase. and also recommended a traffic impact analysis specifically for the whole development, but looking at how those impact the existing 3 intersections, North Lawn in Main, School in Main, and Meyer Road and Cottage Grove Road. Kind of the good thing about this is there is a lot of roads that come in and out of this development. So there's not just one street that kind of serves it. People can kind of make their way and whatever's the most convenient. So we'd still want to see what that trip distribution looks like. That's pretty much the summary of the letter. There's more in there, but that was kind of some of the points that we discussed.
Just to
at Plan
expand
Commission.
on Hammerhead for those that might not know.
Oh, yeah.
Or so it's
Matt.
not it's okay. It's not a full cul-de-sac. Think of a hammerhead shark. What the head looks like. That's the shape of it. It allows for a proper turnaround, especially at least for a temporary time period before the next phase comes on. But
Yep.
that's the engineering
That's
terminology.
That's a term there, but yeah, it's just a turnaround for larger vehicles or any vehicle on a road that's a dead end at a phase, but then ultimately will not be a dead end and it would be removed.
Can I ask, since we're on the Hammerhead, are those made for like a fire truck to be able to turn around and navigate? Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
And we would want to see that it can make that movement as well with a turning movement, so.
You could probably come see one at the end of Pheasant Run, or Morning Dove, or Red Hawk.
All right. Any other comments, engineering or staff?
We just add, we had the public hearing as well for this. There were no official comments during the hearing. We have had a little correspondence with Kim Bannigan, the property owner, kind of in the middle of what will be phase 4 here on the drawing. Just wanting to make sure the street in front of our house will continue to be usable and get plowed and all that kind of thing. And just some concerns about construction dust and that sort of thing. But, Dane County does our erosion control inspections and does a pretty good job of staying on top of that kind of thing. So I think we've addressed her concerns that she was asking about.
And we definitely left it open to please continue to reach out to us.
for sure.
We'll work on concerns and mitigating them.
Yep. And then Paula reminded me with the question about the fire vehicles. Fire and EMS has looked at this as a concept and as a preliminary plat. They'll probably have more official comments when there's, fire hydrants located and things like that. But I think the issues they kind of raised are being addressed with this too. They were hoping to see the access from Meyer Road, which they're going to have available throughout the process. With phase 1 and 2 getting switched, there's also 2 access points into phase 1, kind of from the northwest there. So there's actually 3 ways in, which I think suits their needs. They wanted to make sure they had access into the park. I think they were hoping to see a parking lot in the park to reduce the congestion of street parking around the park, which is what we're looking at doing. And then just naming the streets, I think, was another thing they mentioned. So I think we're well on our way to addressing their concerns as well.
I just have a couple comments on process, if that's all right. So obviously this land is still technically in the town. The developer has submitted, or the property owners have submitted an annexation petition. That was done in early May, I think, but there was a transition at DOA and it got lost in the shuffle. So they have technically 20 days from the date it's submitted to provide their comments. So it is what it is, but so that has just sort of delayed the DOA opinion letter. So we're not supposed to take action unless we consider that letter that DOA provides. So the annexation petition has just been delayed on that end. But this could be approved preliminarily, just basically on the condition that this is annexed. It doesn't bind you to annex in the future, but that's one step of the approval. So we've got the preliminary plat, we've got, which is sort of just like an approval of the concept, I guess, but with in mind that if you approve a preliminary plat, if the final plat substantially conforms to that, they're somewhat entitled to approval of the final plat. So as far as like the development approval steps, we would have preliminary plat, final plat, there's still the annexation, and then there's a development agreement that would need to be in place. So that's required by ordinance. We've been working internally on what that development agreement would look like, and we'll obviously bring it back to the board for feedback. But so there are still, quite a few steps in the approval process here, and this will be a phase-by-phase development, so it's not all going to happen at one time, obviously.
Questions from board members? Chris?
First of all, thank you for coming in. Thank you for doing this. Aaron mentioned HOA or covenants. And I'm curious about what the parameters for those usually are for you guys. And like, is it just gonna be shared services for like the pool? Or is there gonna be like land use restrictions? I'm asking that because we've been updating the housing chapter of the comp plan. We got a comp plan update coming later. And I imagine with that is gonna be coming some zoning changes, all of which are generally kind of pointless if we keep approving subdivisions that have land use restrictions that are more restrictive than code. So I'm curious what you usually have for the parameters of those things.
Yeah, so usually there will always be a size. So I would imagine it would be 1,400 square foot for a ranch house, and 1,700 square foot for a two-story house would be where we would set minimums. If people want to put in fences, we want to see a black wrought iron fence because we think they age well. We typically, we don't allow outbuildings, sheds, or any kind of buildings in the backyard. Can you think of anything else, Ryan?
Yeah, the covenants would also dictate responsibility for shared community amenities. So it would outline responsibilities for the pool and ongoing maintenance associated with it.
JP and Casey, for your information, we often do a private pool in a community with more than 200 homes. So where you drive in kind of you see by the phase 2, there'll be a pool and a small bathroom changing station. So HOA fees would pay for that.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't have any problem with HOAs for shared services. I'm a little hesitant with the outbuilding things because I think one of the things we're probably going to end up doing is allowing ADUs.
Yeah.
And it's kind of silly for us to go through all that work to do that. And then if all of our neighborhoods don't allow them anyway, it's just kind of a...
Chris, I think it's a lot size issue. These lots are just on the smaller size where I don't think that an ADU makes as much sense. It's also not. I just think it's a lot size issue. I think any larger lots, I think, would accommodate an ADU better.
Okay. The other question I have is about street width. What are you going to do about street width?
Tyler, what am I going to do about street width? I consider myself an order taker, quite honestly.
I mean, there's no median, so it's probably not a problem, but...
Yeah, I mean, they've got, just for reference, and as soon as you mentioned that, I kind of looked at some of the surrounding streets and other new neighborhoods in the village. So other than Matt Pass, which matches the existing, is 42 feet. And again, to be considered a collector, it would have to go down to 40 at most. All the other streets are 32 from flag of curb. So basically the asphalt itself, the pan of the gutter would add 2 more feet on either side. Those are all within the local street of the ordinance. There are some streets in the neighborhood like Molly. The Molly Lane is only 28 feet. Some of the neighborhood streets in West Lawn are 28. Some of them in Shady are 32. So we've kind of seen that 28 to 32. Both are fallen within the ordinance for a local street. But for the most part, the streets are 32 feet wide of pavement, other than Molly. And then Matt, to match existing, was a little wider. So
is your intent for these streets to have parking on both sides and then 2 travel lanes in the middle?
Not necessarily. Again, I consider myself an order taker. I prefer smaller streets. I think it makes for a better living environment personally, but I consider myself an order taker to the municipal standards.
I was just curious because like we were talking about before, I don't know what the original intent of what they did, and I don't think it's probably not the same as what the original intent was. It was just be nice to know from the beginning what is it intended to be, or what it could be, or I just don't want to be back here in 4 years and we're talking about having no parking signs or putting a bike lane in or something.
It's very similar to other neighborhoods in this area where it's got the connectivity on the sidewalks. It meets the radiuses that are the tighter, helps for closer pedestrian crosswalks. The 32 edge of pavement to edge of pavement, 34 face to face. It's pretty standard. It allows for the 2 drive lanes and then parked cars. Typically, there's not a lot of streets where you see parked cars on both sides. Kind of allows that flexibility that you have. But no, there is not a median, so there's not as deeper constraints there with passing vehicles.
Okay. Thank you. Overall, I think this is good. The HOA thing with the covenants or whatever with the outbuildings. Personally, I think we should let the people who buy the plots decide that, but I don't think that's a big enough obstacle for me for 226 new houses in the village. So, thank you.
Any other comments from board members? Otherwise, we have 2 discuss and considers on this one.
I have some questions. Okay. So, the last time you were here, or a while back, I was maybe a little crunchy about our neighbors, our town neighbors. And so I just want to share the feedback that I've received from the Bannigans, that you've been good to work with, and I really appreciate that, that you've had some great conversation. So just wanted to note that. And I do appreciate the smaller lot sizes, because as we talked about with our housing chapter, that's definitely a high need for this community. Lots of questions though, so just bear with me and we'll get there. Okay, so Meyer Road is going to be your construction entrance, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so has there been collaboration, conversation with the town, and just in terms of, in the town government, in terms of utilizing that road and what it might look like when you're done?
No,
Oh,
I
okay.
don't know that there's been any conversation with the town about that at all.
Okay.
Ryan, do you know of anything?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Okay. Are there plans to urbanize Meyer at the completion of this subdivision?
Yes, at some point, yes, it would have the village street profile.
Okay.
Yeah, that wouldn't take place until the 4th phase of the development, but
Okay.
that is the ultimate plan.
And so the reconstruction of Meyer Road will be a cost that you assume?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Good. Thank you for the clarification. So traffic impact study. So I obviously made the point during the Public Works report about having a traffic impact study done kind of ahead of time. And I guess my preference would be to have it done before we kind of do this preliminary plat. My biggest concern is Meyer Road. And, you know, when traffic's coming at 55 miles an hour, I think logistically, when people leave that subdivision, and when they understand what it's like to go down Molly and some of those, you know, streets that we talked about that are a little tighter, and you kind of have to weave through a little bit, they may utilize Meyer Road as a primary access point to leave the subdivision. And so I think it's really important, and the other intersections you mentioned as well, and that were mentioned in the staff report, that we have that traffic impact analysis done ahead of time, just so we can make some good decisions about what will Meyer Road in particular look like. Are we gonna have to put a roundabout there? Are we gonna have to, you know, what needs are we gonna have? So that's just kind of one of my points, I guess, I wanted to make, because I don't, you know, like Chris said, we don't want to be back here in a couple of years kind of making modifications on different things. I don't want it to be the same with the traffic. I mean, I think that's reasonable. Some other questions I have. I know the staff report talked about our stormwater basins, and particularly the compliance with the FAA and Blackhawk Field. Has there been any conversation with them or any kind of, you know, work as to find out if that's going to work in that area? And I don't know if that's for staff or you guys.
I mean, we had that in our letter. That is something that we'd want to discuss. You know, there are certain recommendations in the advisory circular from the FAA of where ponds could or should be, or things you're supposed to do with ponds. So I think that's something that we'd want to look at. There are mitigation measures. You can do bird netting, you can do different sorts of things. Tricky part is all the ponds in this neighborhood would fall within the, I believe it's 5,000 foot thing. So it wouldn't just be the one at the north side. It would be all of them. We have other ponds nearby that don't have those. So that would be something just to kind of see. The FAA guidance is, it's not, there's not a lot of shalls in there. There's some shoulds, but I think that's something that we still would want to talk with the developer about on different measures with that.
I appreciate that. And you talked about kind of, discussion later this week coming on water main sizes. Sounds like you have some other concerns that need to be worked out as well in that regard. Back to my questions. I'm sorry, I'm just following my notes here. I guess maybe this is for staff. Have we evaluated what existing water infrastructure and well capacity, if it's sufficient for supporting the subdivision? And I mean, maybe down the road, like at one point, do we have to drill a new well?
Yes, as part of our utility master planning that was done in 2022, which is linked on our website if you're ever interested in a very fun read. We do have the capacity in our distribution system and our wells and our towers to handle this system. We do have well 5 planned for several years out, just as the community continues to grow, but that's not due to just one development. It's how we continue to grow and just where we grow and how our needs are supported. As Ty mentioned, we are talking internally just to confirm sizing of the water main. There's some 12-inch and 10-inch that are dead ends that would link into their neighborhood, but it's not anything that is detrimental. It's just more of making sure that our looping and our sizing of our water main is accurate.
Thank you.
Based on the preliminary plat, it would generate roughly $330,000 of impact fees for well 5.
Perfect.
Just want to make sure I got that number for you.
Thank you. I would just say I share Chris's concerns about HOA. And again, it's not necessarily a deal breaker, but I think, having some movement, when we look at these smaller lot sizes, and particularly we're trying to, get to first-time home buyers and young families, right, buying homes. The addition of black wrought iron fences and, some of those decisions that are kind of made for them, it'd be nice for them to have a little creative freedom in that regard. So if there's a way to kind of work through that.
I'll offer up a couple things right away. Like, honestly, outbuildings and sheds are not important really to anybody at our company at all. I'd be happy to just remove them. Like, that's really no problem at all. Sizes, I'm happy to reduce the sizes if you think there's a need for something even smaller than what I had quoted. Like, we are developing what we're calling our essential collection, which we don't currently have plans to put here, but kind of getting back to the basics of home ownership, kind of like the house you grew up in sort of concept. Down the road, I might, maybe I would come back here and ask about a conversation about maybe a section of that in here. That would be really fun because I'm kind of really into getting people back into home ownership. It's getting away from the general public. Fences, we're pretty particular about fences. When you just let all kinds of fences go, you regret it down the road. Okay. So
I don't care about fences so much.
That's a tough one.
It's kind of a balancing act because I would like that people to have the option of it, but it's also like I don't think a lot of people are clamoring for ADUs right now. So it's like I said, it's not a huge deal. It's just I like to have the option if they want it.
We're all about home ownership and creating as many home ownership opportunities as possible. So you'd be shocked how flexible I am on a lot of these things, especially the direction we're talking.
Yeah, I think if you could remove the sheds. And perfect.
Yeah,
okay, good.
Yeah, what else you want?
And are you talking, when you mention lot size and even smaller homes, like, are you talking about a smaller footprint than starting at a 1,400 square foot residence?
We are designing, our essential collection we are designing a collection of homes that meets those requirements. Yeah.
I mean, I would love to see that. I think, you know, I know you talked about the price point starting at 500,000, right,
Yeah.
for most of these lots, and to get it a little lower
Right.
into a more affordable category, even if it's only a part of the subdivision, I think would be.
Let's put a pin in that. I'd love to come back
Okay.
here and talk about carving out an area for that. I'm very excited about that particular product line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think there's a lot of great things. And I think there's also like just a lot of kind of questions yet and some things that we need to do.
Well, some of those questions are typically things that, like, you know, we don't do traffic impact analysis without approvals and stormwater
Understood.
considerations. So some of the open items are really items that are done after approvals are done.
Understood. Yeah.
Okay.
And those are conditions already that
Correct.
staff have identified, and they come later on in the development process,
Correct.
and then obviously get looped into the developer's agreement. And
Yep.
if they can't, if you're not going to do what we need you to do, your fair share of,
Right.
obviously, the project's not going to go forward.
And I understand that. I understand that. I'm raising questions now because as Rick kind of alluded to is, you know, really our greatest legislative authority is during the annexation process, right? And so we haven't gone through that yet. And so we're kind of putting the cart before the horse a little bit by approving the preliminary plat now. And so and again, Rick's comments about we can't really make substantial changes to the final plat. My preference would be that we take up the annexation first. That gives, you know, our village engineers and you time to kind of work out some of those other details and then kind of move forward with this. So, you know, I'm not opposed to the idea of the subdivision or anything. We're having great conversation.
Yeah.
I'd like for that to continue. So I don't, I'm
I-
not totally ready tonight to jump on this without some other work, I guess.
Okay.
Casey?
Thank you again for being here, and I appreciate the call to us, although I was at all the previous board meetings, so I remember all the plans. Asking about the HOA conversation, so is Newman going to be administering the HOA? It was my understanding usually those were by the residents and that they elected a board and a president and so on. How is that going to be structured?
Yeah, so in the beginning, we are the board of the homeowners association, which is a completely separate legal body.
Right.
And then there's rules for board membership. But, you know, we take at some point, we lose a spot on the board and a neighbor joins it. And then as the subdivision fills up, it gets converted from
Okay.
managed by us to managed by the neighbors.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Then I guess, and this might be a question sort of for Rick. At whatever stage of that for the HOA, what, like Chris was talking about, you know, we want there to be, you know, not a lot of conflict between what the HOA is, what an HOA is trying to do in an area versus village ordinances and zoning and so on. I'm also thinking, you know, so like the existing neighborhood that this like kind of fits into, I don't believe there's any HOAs or covenants or anything like that there right now. So, I mean, do you foresee, Rick, or any sort of conflict or friction or things where it would, you know, is there anything that we ought to do, you know, ahead of time to say like, hey, this is, you know, like this, if there's something to say like, this is the most an HOA can do, or is that already covered by ordinances and such?
So I guess that from a village standpoint, we don't really have a lot of requirements related to like HOAs or restrictions on what they do. I mean, those are private property rights that it's somewhat murky on our ability to go into that field. I mean, the legislature has done so. I think they made specific rules that say like an HOA can't prevent you from flying the American flag, something like that.
Right.
But I mean, from my experience, one of the biggest issues that comes up for HOAs is if there's like private infrastructure, like if it's maintaining private streets and things like that, or private stormwater. Mm-hmm. Sometimes the issue is the HOA just stops maintaining it, and the village is ultimately the one that ends up doing it. And I can't speak for this developer, like their previous HOAs and things like that. That's just what I've seen is, if it's sort of like everything is private in there, ultimately the village kind of ends up taking over 30 years down the line because the HOA just doesn't want to do it anymore.
Okay, yeah, so that sort of thing would be my concern is if, if things, the start of the HOA, you set up and it's for, the pool maintenance and other, more mild things, and that's fine. But then, then you're no longer on the board, it's the residents there. If it's, something like, oh, we're going to be, far more restrictive than the village ordinances or things like that. So I don't know if this needs to be like a staff direction or motion kind of thing, but I'd like us to make sure that an HOA cannot exceed the authority of the village in outlandish regards. I don't, beyond like the initial things you're setting, again, for the pool, for shared maintenance, for things like that, but not going grossly beyond that. I don't know if that's possible.
I've looked into it somewhat, and maybe we can talk another time about it.
Sure. Yeah, again, this
Yeah.
would be a separate agenda item potentially, but okay.
Yeah.
Then maybe I'll send you an email then, because
I thought
this will be later in the process.
Just, this is an interesting conversation for me. I've never done a neighborhood without an HOA. This is interesting.
Yeah.
And there's not the best part of my job, by the way.
I mean, beyond the pool maintenance and so on, since you said you're an order taker, are you amenable to limiting it or removing it beyond what's minimally necessary? Or do you?
So like a clause in the declarations that say.
Yeah, or I imagine it would be in the bylaws that set it out from my reading about how these sort of things function. I mean, you can set it up at the beginning and set it up so that it can't be like amended away later on kinds of things.
Yeah. I can look at the language and see and add something to that effect. Our intention is to not create a tool where people can be exclusionary.
I don't, I don't think that you would, but again, when it becomes the residents that are there, I don't want it to be, like a separate little kind of thing. So that was my question about how it starts right now. So thank you.
Great.
Heidi.
I guess I kind of fall on the opposite side here. Quarry Ridge Estates does have a declaration of covenants that's filed. And it lays out a number of things like what if you can park a recreational vehicle in your driveway. In the neighborhood I live in, what kind of fences you can have, if you store your trash cans outside, because I mean, it does create a smell for your neighbor. So I think it helps protect, well, you can see as your own property rights of owning your own property. I understand that perspective, but I also understand the perspective of being a neighbor, and then you have these shared expectations of the neighborhood and how you want that to feel and how big of a driveway goes onto the sidewalk. Like, you can only have a certain curb cut on the road, but are people backing all over the sidewalks on their side of the sidewalk? So I think that there are, good reasons to have some shared expectations that this is, a neighborhood that I see the plus sides of it too. And, for example, the fences, I mean, it creates an open view to see your neighbors, to visualize your neighbors, rather than putting in privacy fences where no one talks to each other. They just go in their backyard and they are, neighborly. But then if you have a noisy dog that barks at every reactionary thing, privacy fence is nice. So I see both sides. So I think
we do a really nice job. I think we're not meant to be up in everybody's business. And I think there's some general clauses that discuss a more restrictive amendment to the covenants down the road. We can put in some common sense rules there.
Well, and Rick, can you tell us roles and responsibilities of the village board regarding details of HOA?
Probably fairly limited.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Here, the kicker, I guess, in this situation is there's the annexation, right? So that's a legislative decision where we could theoretically impose, some sort of it's a fine line, I guess, as far as, you know, how detailed are we getting into in the HOA regulations and declarations?
Chris?
Three things. One, just circling back on what Paula was saying, and you said we put a pin in it. Maybe something that we could look into is a residential TID section in that area.
Okay.
I don't know if it'll work out, but maybe something to look into. And second, I'm just curious how you come up with the names for subdivisions like this. Like, do you just get in like some guys in a room and say, "How about this? How about this?" Or how's that work?
That's so funny.
We've begun to defer to our marketing team.
Oh, okay.
I happen to like gin, so I went with Juniper Fields.
Okay. Okay. Third, I just want to thank you for being flexible and working with us and being willing to listen, which I feel like is in stark contrast to some previous presentations we've had. So I just want to say I appreciate you.
Thank you.
JP?
Again, I just want to echo what Chris just said for a lot of the exact same reasons. I really do appreciate you all being willing to go to any and all of our committees. I've been watching, like in particular, the Parks Committee here and that conversation, the back and forth, and what you're willing to do and how you really want to help set us up in the right direction and being willing to work with us is really appreciated. So again, thank you so much for not only being here, but being willing to work with us. I guess today's my parks kicker, where again, I really want to throw out that I love your idea of that central park and how it's designed, and I appreciated your designs about the size, kind of giving us some idea in there and being willing to work with us to ensure that is set up correctly in there. I had something else, and I can't think of it right at the moment. But thank you.
For us Gen Xers sitting at the table, I know that I've referred to this already as Juniper Breeze, which was a Bath and Body Works fragrance from the 1990s. So I'm certain that more people in this community are probably going to use that name. So I apologize if I refer to that in public. So like I said, I love where we're going with this. I think we're getting there. Mine is just a process-oriented kind of thing, where I just want to make sure that we don't lose the opportunity to have some leverage in the annexation process, like as we talked about with potential, not that I'm saying we're going to ban HOAs or anything like that, but I think if we can get through that annexation process first and make sure that the infrastructure and some of those bigger guidelines are taken care of, I'd like to see that happen before the plat approval. But like I said, I'm in favor. We're on the right road. I want the annexation to occur first.
I hear you, and I respect it. It leaves me with a huge problem, and that is I want to pave in this subdivision by the time asphalt plants close this November, and time is ticking away. And it takes a long time to go from approved plans to grade this out, to put in the infrastructure, and I don't know that I can afford to lose 2 weeks on a traffic. We got to fire this stuff up and get going on it, and it's hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I'm really looking for a substantial, meaningful approval here of this plat, and I understand it's going to be conditioned on the annexation, but I'm confused about what leverage we're even talking about here. Everything feels sort of statutory.
Well, again, I don't know yet because I haven't seen an annexation agreement, right? And again, that's this body's one mechanism we have to really make sure that this is what we want to bring into the community and such. I do understand you wanting to get going. I know that the annexation questionnaire is on the town board's agenda, right, for tonight. And so I don't see this taking a month or anything, but even having 2 weeks allows our village engineer to kind of do some more work. Like he mentioned at the end of the week, he was going to reach out to you. So I'm not talking stringing this out forever. I just
want to be clear though, like the questions he's talking about, the water upsizing, that always happens after approvals of stuff, Paul. Always. I've never worked all that stuff out before these approvals come in.
I'm aware.
Yeah, I think we're jumping the gun on some of those issues that
Some
may
of
come
them,
later.
yes.
And this is the condition on the annexation, which was approved in Plan Commission. So.
just know, I mean, if we approve this, right, we can't make substantial changes later, right? Rick said that. And, you know, depending on this annexation and things of that nature, I just want to make sure we're doing this the right way. You know, measure twice, cut once. And let's, I don't know, just follow the process.
Yeah, I think, in my opinion, we're on the right track with the process, and we're going to get a lot of more information as we continue on with the next steps.
Okay.
More discussion, or?
I'm willing to make the motion.
Okay. There are two, so we'll take the first one.
First.
Yes.
Yep. So I will formally make the motion for Newman Homes approval of the preliminary plat for Juniper Fields, proposed 108, Juniper Fields with staff conditions, which I believe do include the annexation portion in there, so.
Did you want to remove condition 7?
I assume that was
I mean,
part
it's
of
not
that.
really applicable anymore, so.
Okay, so making sure that's clear that the staff conditions as stated in here.
I would second, and then I have a question, then, you know, if we're talking about some areas where we might have opportunity for a little bit smaller lots and squeezing a couple more in a couple places, to make, you know, some areas a little more, you know, attainable, that still falls under the substantially similar
I would
requirement?
expect that I would have to come in and get that approved by.
Right, but it would come in the final plat, or, yeah.
Or an amendment?
Or an amendment to this?
Well, if we're talking about like adjusting lot sizes or like the layout, that's a good question. I think if we're trying to require them to put more lots in there, I mean, and we're saying, no, we're not going to approve the final plat because it is, you know, not 250 units instead of 226. I think that's maybe a little bit a step too far. But again, we have the annexation, which that's kind of like the next lever. But obviously, like if they submit a plat that has 226 units that is, you know, similar layout here, then I think it's substantially similar.
Okay, yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking in my mind, you know, if you can make a few areas that there might be some opportunities, but not changing everything around to, I guess, I would be comfortable with that in the next step, yeah.
I mean, there's also a portion of this that's not part of the preliminary plat, like the Phase 6 area that's being annexed later. Whether that's the appropriate spot for it or not, I don't know off the top of my head, but that, if it was done in that area, that's not being platted yet anyway, so.
All right. There's, a motion by JP, second by Murphy. Any final discussion? Anyways, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No?
Two noes. Abstain? Motion carries. Did you get that? Okay. And then there's a second discuss and consider.
I'll make the motion to approve of the zoning map amendment to rezone the single-family resident parcels in Juniper Fields preliminary plat to SR6 and future parkland stormwater retention areas to park in open space.
There were recommendations.
Oh, there were? Okay, sorry, with staff recommendations.
And I'll second.
All right, motion by JP, second by Murphy. Any discussion, final discussion on this one?
Cindy, I was just gonna add some economics in the last one, just, you know, talking about TIF districts earlier. Obviously, this area is not in a TIF district. In today's dollars, this development at full build-out would be approximately $130 million, which is equivalent to 2.7 to 3 million annually in revenue.
All right, for the zoning amendments to rezone, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No?
Did you get that? Abstain? Motion carries. All right, reports from, thank you for coming. Thank you for putting so much time and effort into all of it too. We appreciate it. Reports from village officers, village attorney.
I have nothing for you guys tonight.
Cool. Village administrator.
Yes. One notable item under celebration tonight is our Deputy Parks and Rec Director, Trista Taylor, had a published article in the Wisconsin Public Recreation Association's blog related to their annual national conference. So that's pretty significant. And other than that, happy to take any questions anyone has.
What was your time in the 5K? Oh, wait, I wasn't supposed to ask that.
9 seconds better than my wife.
Any comments or questions on the village administrator reports or the tracker?
I have a question on the tracker, and I emailed about, people are asking me what's happening with Creed, what's going on with Creed, and so have they submitted a site plan to the staff yet? I mean...
No, we haven't even gotten response yet from comments on development agreement.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay. Communication and miscellaneous business. First up is to consider the approval of vouchers.
Make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Okay.
Oh.
Motion by Murphy, second by... Pick one. JP. Any other discussion or questions for Cameron on the bills list? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. Correspondence. Heidi and I met with Aaron and then two representatives from Dane County Habitat for Humanity today. Maybe pull together some information for Cottage Grove and kind of kick things off. Any other correspondence? All right, upcoming community events.
I would say that the Cottage Grove Area Historical Society has our brat feed on Fridays from 10:30 to 2 p.m. In the Piggly Wiggly parking lot. And this year, the Historical Society decided rather than keep the funds for ourselves that we would donate to groups in the community. So this first brat feed on the 19th, the funds raised will be donated to the Cottage Grove Schools and Family Organization. And then the August brat and corn feed, we have corn at the second one, will be donated to Stuff the Bus. So looking to both support youth this year.
Yep.
And then this Friday is the Jumpstart to Summer Reading at Granite Ridge that's been hosted by the Library Board and the Friends of the Cottage Grove Library. So I know I mentioned that last time, but I just want to point out that that's coming up here very quickly here, and it's always a great event. With this year, we will have the Novel Motion Circus coming in, so as a group that has that big wheel that you can stand on and kind of roll around, among other things. So it's always been a hit.
All right. Future agenda, or Cameron, you want to say something?
Marketplace days are between now and our next meeting, because our next meeting isn't until July 20th.
Mm-hmm.
We will be there and ready to talk about revaluation for community members who have questions.
Are you going to be placed right next to the dunk tank?
I hope so.
No dunk tank this year.
Is it too early to talk about saving the date for August 27th? John? Or there's community night out, but I was thinking the more exciting dates at the end of August. I don't know if we're allowed to. There was a little teaser in the mailer for everyone that they got, but.
It's not too early, no.
Okay.
No. Nerdvana. 90s cover band.
It's no Taylor Swift. However, it's going to be pretty great. And then there's also community night out the week before that. So lots of fun things in the village.
Can we have Juniper Breeze at the 90s night?
Do they still make that?
We'll work
I
on
feel
that.
Like I need
They
to,
don't make it.
Find some
It was my absolute favorite.
on eBay or something. I have a
I was going to
Paula's
ask him.
birthday is in August, so Juniper Breeze.
Yeah.
We should just plant juniper trees in this juniper fields, and then it will be fine.
Yes.
Okay. we digress. Future agenda items, including the handbook draft for the board to look at, a prioritization, capital projects survey coming out tomorrow.
Tomorrow afternoon, the survey will come out. Please ask questions. There's roughly 2 weeks to complete that survey. So please reach out to staff with any questions on any of the items that are being proposed.
Rockin' and Bakken will probably have a special event permit-ish or liquor license to consider at the next meeting. We'll talk about the traffic analysis study for CGS on a future agenda in July. We'll have the data center moratorium at our July meeting. Likely the annexation will come back if they hire people.
Cindy, you mentioned early in the meeting, we probably won't do the June 30th meeting.
That's what I was going to say. I was going to end with
Okay,
that.
okay, thank you.
So we did get a preliminary, well, we all received the preliminary draft and it's incomplete. And so we're going to, as the stakeholder group's going to be meeting and working on that. And it's more important to get it right than it is to have something that we can't use to make decisions in the future. So we're going to go ahead and cancel the June 30th joint meeting. Probably push that out until like late summer. Just because we want to make sure we have a comprehensive document to go through with some actionable items and that kind of stuff.
That's the same night as a regional housing meeting, annual regional housing meeting, if anybody wants to go to that instead.
Yeah.
I'll be there.
That sounds like fun. Thanks, Chris. Okay. Number 12.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Murphy and JP taking us home. Non-debatable, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Recording stopped.